Morning, sorry I'm late.
That's all right. Good morning. Others are in the same category, so we're waiting a bit. Good
Ellen,
morning, Chancellor.
I think you can disregard the message I just sent you. It seems as if you've already done what I
I have. Yeah.
Okay.
It's all taken care of.
So, Ellen, I think we're ready.
I think we are. We have the Chancellor and Jim Thalen.
Okay, excellent. Good morning, everybody. Happy New Year.
morning.
Welcome to a very meaty agenda of the Finance, Facilities, and Technology Committee. We have a lot to get through today, so we're going to try to move quickly through them as fast as we can to keep on schedule. And so that means let's begin quickly with a roll call. Ellen?
Certainly. Good morning, everyone. I'll just remind we're going to have a lot of people on Zoom today. It will likely spread over to more than one screen for the chair of the committee. So don't use the hand raise function, just speak up. That way we can capture anybody that has a question. With that, Trustee Kane.
Yes, here.
Trustee Doak.
He was here.
Here.
Trustee Donnelly.
Here.
Trustee Irwin.
Here.
Trustee Gardner.
Here.
Trustee McMahon.
Here.
Trustee Martin.
Here.
Trustee Riley.
Here?
Trustee Rotundo.
Here.
And I don't believe Trustee Cates has joined. He should be joining shortly. We're all set.
Great. That's terrific. And we heard from Roger. We know he'll be along, but we have a couple of key issues for executive session. Could I have a motion for the Finance, Facilities, and Technology Committee of the Board to go into executive session under the provision of 1 MRSA section 4056-C to discuss the condition, acquisition, or disposition of real property or economic development if premature disclosure of that information would prejudice the competitive or bargaining position of the humane system. Could I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Peggy, seconded by Jim, I think. All those in favor?
No, I'll have to do roll call, sorry.
That's right, sorry.
Trustee Kane.
Yes.
Trustee Doak.
Yes.
Trustee Donnelly.
Yes.
Trustee Irwin.
Yes.
Trustee Gardner.
Yes.
Trustee McMahon.
Yes.
Trustee Martin.
Yes.
Trustee Riley.
Yes.
Trustee Rotundo.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
because he occupied several very important positions, like the chairman of the ruling party for a time, which he left in November and transferred to Mr. Ferland. Now, Mr. Ferland occupies the position of chairman of the Security Council. And it now looks like he's occupying more and more authority, more and more power. Do you think that means that something revolution in the process might be more possible, or is it likely to take an even tougher line against the investor? It's difficult to say. I think that on the one hand, of course, we try to do so, and a number of the statements compared to Nazarbayev, these statements are more rational, more peaceful, calling for a change, blaming the government and the prevention of this crisis. But on the other hand, there was looting and rioting and breaking into official buildings. So I think we will combine a more peaceful approach, going after those who enter the city hall and attack certain businesses. Does this feel like a revolution or a revolution in the late, one of the color revolutions that we've seen from other former Soviet republics, or not? I don't think it looks like a color revolution, because these are different groups, with different motivations, in different parts of the country. It was like a trigger, this rise in the price of gas, but it does not mean that it's some sort of coordinated, organized effort. Of course, some probably political and economic, but I don't think it will tip over into a political level and lead to systematic changes and so on, or changes in power. In the right way, with any
Writing's not that easy, but Grammarly can help. This sentence is grammatically correct.
Hey everybody, I'm Zach from Bluebot Tech, and today we're going to be going over how to install and set up Home Assistant. Always go over how to invest our flash it to. We should be able to go. So the first place it takes us is the Lovelace dashboard. As you can see, we have our navigation bar over here on the left side. So far, it leaves us with a weather, most likely based on that location.
On 20-2016, I have the OUI, and is that going to be a plea? As charged. Kelly, is your name Kelly L. Porton with the date of birth 5/17/1979?
Yes, sir.
And by the way,
Yes, sir.
Porton, can you hear me?
I'm Zach from
Yeah.
your USB storage. Pull that out.
The charge here, Ms. Porton, is operating on the influence of Class B offense, which is a misdemeanor. So that occurred on August 27th, 2020 in Augusta. So that charge
Ellen, I think we look good.
We're all set.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the public session of the Finance, Facility, and Technologies Committee. We have a hefty agenda before us, and we will clearly see throughout this that it is a new year, and Happy New Year, but 2022 brings us again the pandemic, and we will see its implications on costs and construction costs as we go through this agenda. So here we go. So let me just move us along. We have a tight agenda. I want to try to keep us to time. Remind everyone to please stay muted unless speaking, and let's move immediately into the first item of discussion, the budget update with Vice Chancellor Lowe.
Thank you, Trustee Riley. I'm going to jump right in and start talking about the FY22 budget update. I did just want to echo a point that you had made and just ask all of my fellow presenters after me to be aware of how much time you have on the agenda and make sure we stick to that. We have a lot of items, and if everyone goes over 5 minutes late, we'll be here until 5 tonight. So we have built in a little bit of buffer, so I'm hopeful we'll get right back on schedule. So let me start with, again, the FY22 budget. We've been having conversations with this committee about the FY22 budget for certainly more than a year now, going back to our planning phases and then ultimately implementing the budget in late June of last year. We had talked about the possibility of putting together a full-blown supplemental, a new supplemental if we had multiple requests or if we had lots of necessary revisions. I don't think that is ultimately the case. While we do have a budget gap that has grown a little bit, the solutions that we would propose are the same solutions that we proposed as part of the original 22 budget. So the categories aren't changing, the numbers are just getting a little bit bigger. And so in conversations with the Chancellor, with the presidents, and especially with the CBOs, I think what we've decided to do is come to this committee and just provide regular budget updates from now through the rest of the fiscal year at each one of our meetings. And we'll talk about where we are in 2022. We'll talk about what those solutions are and share that information with the committee, with the public. And if there are any questions, we can go from there. So let me just jump right into fiscal year 22 and where we find ourselves. So this is a document. The format should look familiar. We essentially adopted the format of our budget forecast that we do 3 times a year. And so let me just make sure everyone's familiar with how to read the document, and then we'll start talking briefly about some of the specifics. So the budget column here represents the budget as it was passed back in June of last year. At that time, we were projecting a budget gap of about 10.1 million. To be clear, we did resolve that budget gap. We got that budget gap down to 0. We did that through a combination of federal funding, campus reserves, and system reserves. And so while you see the 10.1 right here, do know that as you pass that budget, it was back into balance, even though it certainly used a large portion of one-time resources. That same gap, that $10.1 million gap, has now grown to nearly $27 million. It's an increase, as you can see here, of about 16.5 million. I'm going to focus in on really two causes of that gap. And I really wanted to pause and make sure that I was clear about this point. I'm simply in this exercise talking about here's the budget that we passed and here's where we are today. And I don't want my comments in any way to seem like that I'm blaming the deficit on these 2 particular items, because that's not the case. It's just they are literally different than when we built our budget. And the biggest one is collective bargaining increases. And so I've had some questions to me. I know some of the campuses have had questions as well about, why didn't we plan for a collective bargaining increases? Surely we should have known that that was going to be the case. And certainly we were aware of that as we were building the budget. Those of you that have participated in our multi-year financial analysis exercises, you know that we budget in, even though they're guesses, we budget in compensation increases as part of that exercise. We're 70 to 80% people on some of our campuses. Collective bargaining increases, any increases, significantly impact our budget. So it's reasonable that we've had that. Had that growth in the gap. As to why we didn't budget for them, just recall when we were building the FY22 budget, which would have been back in 20 and 21, we were in an incredibly different situation than we are right now. The virus feels like it's still about the same, but what's different is when we started building that budget, all of the federal funds that have come to us were not necessarily right on the horizon. And so at the time we were building that budget and we were having conversations about what we should assume for compensation assumptions, we were also doing an exercise that was requested from our friends in state government on how we would manage if our appropriation was cut by 20 million or 24 million. So while we were figuring out that exercise, while we were looking to balance a budget that potentially would have $20 million less in state resources, the notion that we could then also hand out huge increases in compensation without meaning massive layoffs just didn't seem realistic. And so when we built the budget, we were transparent about it. We made the decision that if we're looking at a reduction of that size, it seems unreasonable that we would have large compensation increases. And so that's how the budget was balanced. Obviously, after the fact, we had a couple more rounds of federal support. We had some support come in from our friends in state government. We are incredibly grateful for that. We've talked about it in lots of occasions, but that was literally the reality. That's why you don't see those collective bargaining increases in that original budget. So if you break this down, if you think about this 16.5 million, roughly 12.5 million of that increase is associated with the bargaining agreements that have been reached to date, as well as some assumptions that we've made for contracts that are outstanding. We don't know how those contracts will ultimately settle, but we felt we needed to at least make some assumptions for budget projection purposes. So we've made some assumptions for those outstanding contracts, but roughly 12.5 million of that 16.5 million is associated with bargaining and benefit changes. The other piece, and this will be no surprise for those that participated in the ASA briefing on Monday and that have participated in other conversations about enrollment shifts. The other, in this case, it's $4 or $5 million, and it depends a little bit on the campus, is associated with enrollment changes. And I'll give you an example. So you see the gap at Farmington is 2.4 million now. A little less than $1 million of that is the compensation increases, but a full 1.7 million is associated with enrollment projections not meeting budget targets. Similar issue at Presque Isle, where the enrollment side, and again, it's not all enrollment, some of it is the auxiliary impact of those lower enrollment numbers. At Presque Isle, that number is about 900,000, and at USM, it is 2.8 million. Most of the other campuses, in fact, all of the other campuses, the enrollment numbers were pretty much right in line with what we had projected in the budget. Even if the enrollment number wasn't exactly the same, the revenue from the enrollment was. So maybe you were a little off, but you had more out-of-state students. Maybe your retention was a little bit higher than the previous year. So you didn't have at least an enrollment variance. So those are the two sources of the gap. Again, it's just reflecting what was different from what we budgeted. I don't want anyone to walk away and think I'm blaming the gap on collective bargaining increases. It's just literally where the gap is. So if we're looking at a gap now of roughly 26.5 million, the obvious question is how are we looking to resolve that gap? You see that right here in our deficit resolution column. Again, I'll go through these fairly quickly. About 11 million of that gap we would propose to close with the use of federal resources. These are the higher education emergency relief funds. We've had these funds in some cases a part of fiscal year 20, fiscal year 21, and now a part of fiscal year 22. If you see a campus is not using those funds, it's either A, because they didn't need them, or B, because they exhausted them in a previous budget round. That is what you see reflected here, 11 million. Again, quickly, if the committee approves this and ultimately we end up with using 11 million to close it out, we would have a balance of those federal funds of about 11.9 million left on paper. But I will say in conversations with the campuses based on previous actions of this committee, nearly all of those federal dollars, in total about 57 million since the beginning of the pandemic, have now been allocated out. They've been allocated out for either budget purposes, student debt relief, several of our campuses have looked at. And then this committee has approved several HVAC projects, a couple at UMA, another we're having conversations about at USM that would use the remainder of these, of any federal funds that are left other than, maybe a few $100,000 here and there. The reserve column represents campus reserves. And so again, just to follow this one, you can see the University of Maine in this case, and Machias is forecasting a gap of about 9 million. They're proposing to resolve that gap with a $9 million transfer from campus reserves. Similar scenario here at UMA, a small amount of early college reserves you'll see here at the University of Maine at Farmington. I want to go down through, if I just continue down through here, Budget Stabilization Fund. These are the funds that this committee has previously approved, a transfer to the University of Maine at Farmington of 1.5 million. The committee, as you can see in my note down here, actually approved a transfer of 1.9 million to the law school for the current fiscal year, but just based on where expenditures are to date, and great credit to Dean Softly and to Nicole. They've actually managed to stay within their budget, actually forecasting just a little bit better budget situation. So we would only need to transfer 1.7 million, and that gets us almost back into balance. The variances you see are at Presque Isle and at Farmington. So Farmington has a $2.4 million gap. A $2 million variance, a $5.5 million gap. If they exhaust the rest of their federal funds, if they use those early college dollars, if we transfer the 1.5 million that the committee had previously approved, they are still left with a gap of 1.7 million. Similar situation at Presque Isle, where you can see they only have 733,000 of federal funds that are available for budget balancing purposes. They've got a gap of 2.4. That leaves a gap there of 1.7 million. We have two pending requests with the Chancellor for budget system funds, budget stabilization fund transfers to these two campuses to increase the one at Farmington, to approve one at Presque Isle. We're continuing to review those requests. We are doing, an analysis of the budget stabilization fund and how we think that fund will look over the next couple of years. And as we start budget conversations with this committee in February and in March, We'll work with the Chancellor. We'll come back and we'll make a formal recommendation on whether we think these transfers make sense, whether we think there is another option out there, and then we'll bring that recommendation to the committee along with that budget stabilization kind of outlook, if you will. So I think, Madam Chair, although quickly, that does get us through what we're looking at for fiscal year 22. As I said at the beginning, what our plan would be is to use each of your meetings through the rest of the year to essentially give you this same kind of briefing as some of the fall, as some of the spring numbers shift. Maybe these gaps hopefully get a little bit smaller. Maybe they get a little bit bigger. We'll work with the committee to get everything into balance as we start working on the 2023 budget. So I think I'll stop right there, Madam Chair. I'll unshare my screen and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ryan. Very concise questions, comments on the budget update? Anyone? Okay, this is an issue we will stay front and center on in future meetings. And Ryan, thank you very much for a very concise report.
Thank you.
Let us move on then. This committee has been deeply interested in capital planning and the costs there. And we are very pleased to have Chip Gavin, the Chief General Services Officer, with us to talk about the status of capital planning and to address some of our concerns about criteria and how we approach it. So Chip, can I turn to you?
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Trustee Riley, and invite comments with your permission from my related colleagues as well as we go here. So just to ground the committee and the reason for this update, as Trustee Riley mentioned, there is an increased interest on the part of not only the board, but the Chancellor as well about our capital planning procedures. We want to take a brief opportunity to reground everybody in what we currently do, how things came to be the way that they are now, and to give you a snapshot of our timeline of taking a renewed look at some of those procedures over the coming months as you work through your budget process. I'm going to recap that briefly for you. I will mention at the outset that this is not an action item, this is an information item, but there is one change that we'll be making that I'll, in our procedures right away, that is referenced in the recap and is highlighted in the documents that you were provided with. This is an opportunity certainly for a sense of the committee or any objections to us making that change. It's not the kind of thing that the committee would normally vote on, but given that we were coming before you, we wanted to flag that change for you. We think it's in keeping with what your interests are, but if we've missed the mark, certainly feel free to let me know. So in brief, the materials that were distributed go something like this, that our capital planning process as it is today and the criteria and how we go about this, the contemporary process really is generated from a review that the board and the management did in 2015 and a series of recommendations that the board adopted at that time. The agenda information goes into some details about that, but it was a year-long effort that trustees participated directly in and sanctioned ultimately. It's the reason that you hear about many of the metrics that you hear about today, the reason why we do things the way that we do them. It's also importantly not really highlighted in your materials, but it's also importantly where some of the more innovative things that we attempt to do springs from. It was at that time that the trustees encouraged us and sanctioned us to try P3 projects and to do some of the things that you've all heard about in your roles as trustees, and in addition to the traditional design bid build process that we use, which remains the core of what we do, but certainly is not the only process that we use to actually conduct and implement the projects that you approve. Also, item 2 in that agenda sheet, some of the things that action in 2015 resulted in is what we often refer to, and I sometimes refer to with all of you, as the 3-tiered capital planning process. you at that time, or the trustees at that time, asked that we adopt and implement a process that would have 3 levels to it, that every campus would have a master plan, a master campus plan, facility plan, not talking about an educational plan per se, but the master plans for facilities obviously need to integrate with everything else the campus is doing. So a master plan for each campus, a long-term capital plan for each campus, and a 1-year capital plan for each campus. You also at that time established a budget, or asked us to establish capital budget advisory team, which does still exist and includes representatives from across the system, from every campus, and from most of the different iterations of roles on university campuses, be they chief business officers or academic leaders or facilities managers or Carolyn and her team or the budget office. And that group meets about once a month, once every other month during the year, and is reestablished every summer by Ryan. So the membership rotates and advises Ryan and I on a variety of capital matters, and helps to bring forward many of the ideas that we bring to you spring from that group. They've been instrumental in helping us be ready to take advantage of capital opportunities, and also instrumental in moving forward with the space constraining and space reduction efforts that the board has supported, that have required a lot of participation from campuses. Additionally, there is a document referred to as a delegation of real property authority matrix that's included in your materials. And that is a brief summary of what the board has authorized through its various policies and actions, and how the authorities that the board has sanctioned sort of line up. It covers a little bit of lease materials as well, and removal of facilities and sale and acquisition of facilities. But for our purposes today, it also covers when the board needs to consider a project, when that would be within the authority of the FFT committee, when it needs to come to the full board, and most recently, this body also made changes, not in policy, but in practice, to exactly how that plays out. And what that really means when it comes to an individual project is that anything more than $500,000 needs to be considered by the board in one way or another. And if it's more than $1 million, it needs to be considered by the full board of trustees. And if it's more than $5 million, beyond being approved by the trustees as potentially part of the consent agenda, the trustees have asked for a full briefing about that project, in addition to any briefing that the FFT may have received. So why all of this interest and why this recap? It should be noted that the reason, or one of the reasons for this, and I think one of the reasons precipitating the chancellor's and the board's renewed interest in capital matters, which is certainly very much welcome, is we're seeing historic levels of investment in capital infrastructure across the University of Maine system, and projects over the course of time get more and more expensive. We have several, $10 million projects going on right now. These are major projects that are certainly attention getting, and really put the university positively in a very different place, and a better place, but nevertheless require a lot of work and require your consideration. So the amount of investment that is occurring and the size of projects to become increasingly attention getting, and that's why we are proposing that we return to a review of our capital planning procedures and report to you periodically in the coming months about how that's going, in addition to reporting to you about the normal 3-tiered planning process. So what that means is, over the coming 6 months or so, the trustees would be receiving a mix of updates from me and from Carolyn and from Ryan and from the Chancellor, some of which would be normal, but we would do a more consistent job of calling out for you that this is part of the annual process. For example, getting to review the amount of money specifically that would be invested in capital as part of the 1-year budgets that you'll be considering, and what those projects are in some detail, an opportunity to ask questions, and to really consider the capital plan and the capital budget as a distinct component of the annual the annual budget process. Then also doing the same thing when you consider the multi-year financial analysis later this year, having an opportunity to do a deeper dive if you have the time and the ability to make the commitment to that time, to look at what is in the 5-year capital plan and how those things are integrated and what different campuses are planning to do, to what extent those resources have been identified and to what extent those resources are aspirational, how different types of resources line up with different types of capital projects, and so forth. So in your agenda item today, there's also this timeline of how we propose to bring these matters before you today. The one item I mentioned at the outset that's a change that we're proposing to make right away is the Board of Trustees previously got quite granular in specifying at the maximum amount or the maximum size project that we would bring before you, pretty precisely what you want those agenda sheets to look like and what topics and issues you want addressed when we bring those projects before you. We're proposing to add a specific additional category to those agenda items that would alert you regularly whether that project was part of a campus's 1-year or 5-year capital plan, and if not, why not, for example, and how it came to be that it's coming before you, but it hadn't been previously considered to be part of the capital plan. So we will move to make that change unless there are objections from the committee or any of its members today. And that will be a first step towards this multi-month briefing process for you about what's going on with capital in the short term, what's going on with capital in the long term, and importantly, we have started a review of how we go about capital planning, and we'll update you about that in March and again over the summer to give you an opportunity, and the Chancellor obviously an opportunity to make any adjustments or provide any feedback that you would like about the 3-tiered capital planning process and the currently collaborative nature about how we go about that and the considerations that are made and whether something gets in the capital plan or not. So I think that was about as brief as I could be, Trustee Riley, and I'm glad to answer any questions that you or the committee may have.
Okay, thank you, Chip. I think all of this also has to relate to the strategic plan and how master planning for capital fits within that. And I would just add that I know that the committee would be interested in addition to what you're adding to the sheets, a better articulation of how any bonded money, any loaned money is repaid and how it crosswalks to Gordian. I thought that materials, particularly in, I think it was tab 17, were quite useful, the charts, but I think I would add a column so that we can all see how that, to crosswalk to Gordian to see how we're addressing the criteria and priorities that they identify.
Understood. I've made notes of both of those matters, and we'll be glad to carry them forward. I would note out of the gate that it sometimes is discouraging when we do that Gordian crosswalk, because a lot of what Gordian cares about, and frankly what we all care about, is the condition of our existing physical assets. And when we build new or invest modest amounts in existing assets, it doesn't often have the kind of change that we would like to see, or when we're investing in non-vertical assets, for example, when we're improving, a steam line, for example, or something like that. Sometimes that doesn't always translate as strongly as we would like to improving our Gordian numbers. So just a caveat there, but glad to make notes and to carry both of those points forward, Trustee Riley.
Great. Comments, questions for Chip? And I can't see everybody. There's so many. If you want to jump in, let me know. Comments or questions? All right. Thank you. We are moving on. Thank you, Chip. Let me move us now. We have 3 named professorships, and I would ask President Farini Mundy to walk us through this and challenge her to help us get back on time.
Okay, I can be very brief. Chair Riley, thank you. We put before you requests for approval for 3 named professorships. These are wonderful opportunities provided by donors for the university to bring new faculty, to support distinguished faculty who are here, to help them continue their research programs, expand their teaching impact, and so forth. And so there are 3 before you, and in accordance with policy 711, which requires us to come to you for these are named professorships, not named chairs. The first is the Elliot R. Barker III Professorship in Chemical Engineering at the University of Maine. The second is the is the Dan, class of 63, and Betty Churchill Professorship in Climate Policy and International Affairs at the University of Maine. That would be based in the School of Policy and International Affairs. And then the third is the Norman B. Stetson, class of 62, Professorship in Electrical and Computer Engineering at the University of Maine. Dean Humphrey is here if we have any specific questions. These are 5-year terms that are renewed through an ongoing process on the campus where committees review the applicants and the nominees and rename them as appropriate each 5 years. So it's really exciting for us to have these, and we, through these resolutions, seek your approval to authorize all 3 of these chairs.
Thank you, President Fruni-Mundy. Questions for the president?
I had one.
Yeah, Trustee King.
Thank you. I mean, maybe, Vice Chancellor, you just answered that, but the difference between a chair and a named professorship, is it the 5-year limitation on that? Is that the distinction?
I believe it's that, as well as the amount of the gift. And the chairs in general can be more substantially supported.
Thanks.
Great. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Thank you, Madam President. The materials were quite clear. So we have 3 separate resolutions for each of these new named professorships, and let me read the first. That the Finance, Facility, and Technologies Committee approves the following resolution to be forwarded to the consent agenda on the January 24th Board of Trustees meeting. That the Board of Trustees accepts the recommendation of the Finance, Facilities, and Technology Committee and authorizes the establishment of the Elliott R. Barker III Professorship in Chemical Engineering. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we've moved and seconded. Ellen, could you take the roll?
Certainly. Trustee Kane,
Yes.
Trustee Doak,
Yes.
Trustee Donnelly,
Yes.
Trustee Irwin,
Yes.
Trustee Gardner,
Yes.
Trustee Cates,
Yes.
Trustee McMahon,
Yes.
Trustee Martin,
Yes.
Trustee Riley,
Yes.
Trustee Rotundo.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
The next is that the FFT Committee approves the following resolution to be forwarded to the consent agenda in the January board meeting. That the Board of Trustees accepts the recommendation of the FFT Committee and authorizes the establishment of the Dan and Betty Churchill Professorship in Climate Policy and International Affairs. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Peggy Rotundo moved. A second?
Second.
Second by Tim. Ellen, could you take the roll?
Trustee Kane,
Yes.
Trustee Doak,
Yes.
Trustee Donnelly,
Yes.
Trustee Irwin,
Yes.
Trustee Gardner,
Yes.
Trustee Cates,
Yes.
Trustee McMahon,
Yes.
Trustee Martin,
Yes.
Trustee Riley,
Yes.
Trustee Rotundo.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Great, thank you. And one more, that the FFT Committee approves the following resolution to be forwarded to the consent agenda of the January board meeting. That the Board of Trustees accepts the recommendation of the FFT Committee and authorizes the establishment of the Norman Stetson 62 Professorship in Electrical and Computer Engineering. Motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Second, thank you. Ellen?
I'm sorry, who seconded?
Peggy Rotundo.
Who made the motion?
Roger Cates.
Thank you. Trustee Kane,
Yes.
Trustee Doak,
Yes.
Trustee Donnelly,
Yes.
Trustee Irwin,
Yes.
Trustee Gardner,
Yes.
Trustee Cates,
Yes.
Trustee McMahon,
Yes.
Trustee Martin. Trustee Martin,
Yes.
Trustee Riley,
Yes?
Trustee Rotundo.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Great, thank you all. Thank you, President Fruni-Mundy. We're back on track, and I would say that this is a nice preview for our discussion about development at the end of the meeting. Really wonderful to see these funds coming in for these professorships. Let us move on and turn back to the president for the renaming of the former North Stevens Hall at the University of Maine.
Thank you. And I should acknowledge for those professorships, we're very grateful to those donors and their families for their incredible generosity. It makes a big difference. That's the theme as well for this next item, where we seek your authorization to rename the building wing that has been called North Stevens Hall as the Karen L. Boudreau Esquire Hall, which would be the formally designated name, and Boudreau Hall would be the common name. This is the result of an extraordinarily generous contribution by Karen Boudreau and her husband. And it will allow us to do what I would consider appropriate renovation within that building. It is a substantial gift of $1 million that will enable this kind of change. And so we are very, very pleased and excited to be able to have this gift. The biography for Karen Boudreau that's in your materials is a very modest one. She's an extraordinarily accomplished attorney, certainly a UMaine alumna, a native of Maine, and we believe this would be extraordinarily exciting, in particular to have a building named after an alumna of French Canadian descent. So with that, I put that before you.
Great, thank you. Any comments or questions? Okay, here's the resolution that the finance facilities and
Can I just
technology.
say, I also think it's very exciting. This is the second building along that same stretch that will be for a woman again, since Beryl or the Williams Hall as well. So the French Canadian piece and also a woman, which is great.
And for those of us who spent our undergraduate careers in Stevens and see it still looks a lot like it looked many years ago, this is a great, great contribution. That the Finance Facilities and Technology Committee approves the following resolution to be forwarded to the consent agenda for the Board of Trustees January meeting. That the Board of Trustees accepts the recommendation of the Finance Facilities and Technology Committee and authorizes the University of Maine system acting through the University of Maine to rename the former North Stevens Hall as the Karen L. Boudreau Esquire Hall, formerly the formal designated name, and Boudreau Hall is the common name. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Emily, and seconded by Peggy Rotundo. Ellen, could you take the roll?
Trustee Kane. Trustee Kane.
Yes.
Trustee Doak.
Yes.
Trustee Donnelly.
Yes.
Trustee Irwin.
Yes.
Trustee Gardner.
Yes.
Trustee Cates.
Yes.
Trustee McMahon.
Yes.
Trustee Martin.
Yes.
Trustee Riley.
Yes.
Trustee Rotundo.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Great. Thank you all. Thank you, Joan. Let's move on now to the Ferland Engineering Education and Design Center. Obviously, an issue we've been following very closely for a budget update with Carolyn McDonough, who's, as you know, Director of Capital Planning and Project Management. Carolyn?
Thank you, Chair Riley. Good morning, everyone. And this item is, as Chair Riley mentioned, a project that's been ongoing now for a few years. So this is our final resolution for additional funding on this project. You may recall, if you were around in 2020 when we last brought this forward at 72 million, we did know we would be back for the final number, and we are here today requesting the additional 6 million to bring the total project up to 78 million. And this additional 6 million comes from the final receipt of gifts for the project, and is going to allow us to finish out with furnishings, equipment, and IT and audiovisual equipment for the classrooms. As noted in our status report, this project is ongoing and still on schedule for opening this coming fall. And Dean Dana Humphrey is also here if you'd like to add anything, and if anyone has any questions.
Great. Dean Humphrey?
So I just add that I greatly appreciate the Board of Trustees support at every step of this project. As Carolyn said, the project is on schedule to be opened for classes this coming fall. We've tentatively selected August 24th as the grand opening for the building. And just to remind the members of the Board of Trustees what we have in this building, we're going to have the best student project design suite in the Northeast. with 48 workbenches. We can assign to groups of students for a semester or a year, and it's surrounded by shops for biomedical engineering, electronics, 3D printing. There's a tool crib, a vehicle shop, a metal shop, a wood shop, and a composite shop. So this is the best space of its kind in the Northeast. We have 6 collaborative classrooms that will be available for classes from all majors across the campus. The campus Welcome and STEM Outreach Center will be located in this building. So when prospective students come to UMaine for a tour, they'll actually start in the Ferland Engineering Education and Design Center. We have teaching labs for biomedical engineering, mechanical engineering technology. We have office space for faculty in biomedical and mechanical engineering, as well as space for their graduate students. And there's multiple collaboration spaces because we want this building to be the gathering place for all engineering students on the UMaine campus. So again, thank you for the Board of Trustees support. And I'd be happy to answer any questions about the building. And I'm sure Carolyn would also be happy to answer any questions about the financing for the project.
Thank you, Dana. Your excitement is palpable, and we share it and congratulate you for your leadership as well. And August 24th, it has to happen, and it's in our calendar. So, questions, comments for Carolyn or Dean Humphrey?
Madam Chair, could I just mention, just to echo that last point that you made, I've been doing this, I feel like I've been having these conversations about this building and this vision for like 8 or 9 years now. So I just want to make sure all of that appropriate credit goes to the dean. I can remember him walking around with a little more than a napkin talking about the vision for this, all the way up to building that campus support and legislative support. And this is how you do it. You need to be persistent and you need to stay on top of it. And just all the credit in the world to Dean Humphrey.
And Mainers aren't known for tooting their own horns, but this is an exciting development for the university and for the state. Comments, questions?
Yeah. Sorry. Quick question. I haven't been involved except for the last year, so I haven't followed the whole history. This sounds incredible. My only question is the additional $6 million in private funding. Is that money raised specifically for this project, or just general money we've raised that's being allocated to this project? Just curious.
It's money raised specifically for this project. In total, including the naming gift, we've raised $25 million in private support for this project, and that's a record amount in the University of Maine system for a single project.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Trustee Cates. Anybody else? Any other questions or comments?
I'll just pile on. Congratulations to Dean Humphrey and the department and all the folks involved. And one of the university's true gems and one of the premier engineering programs in the country, getting this kind of investment and this kind of lift is exactly the direction that we should be doing and the investments that should be made. And thank you for your leadership in making it happen, Dean Humphrey.
Thank you, Trustee Donnelly. Anyone else? I think we could do.
I just can't wait for a tour. That's all I want to say. I can't wait for that. I want Dana Humphrey to give us the tour because the excitement. Trish, I love to use the word palpable because it's perfect. So I can't wait to tour it with you.
So if on that point, I'll just say that I give tours most Fridays at 2:30. So anyone who wants a tour, let me know. We've got the hard hats and the orange safety vests and safety glasses for you. And I lead the tours. So you'll get to hear a little bit more of my enthusiasm on those tours.
That's great. And do the 3 cheers in person. Thank you. So the motion is that the Finance, Facilities and Technology Committee approves the following resolution to be forwarded to the consent agenda of the Board of Trustees January meeting. That the Board of Trustees accepts the recommendation of the FFT Committee and authorizes the University of Maine system, acting through the University of Maine, to increase the Ferland EEDC project authorization by $6 million, bringing the total authorization to expend up to $78 million. Funding for the increased budget will come from additional privately raised funds. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Jim Donnelly, second. Ellen Kane. Ellen?
Trustee King?
Yes.
Trustee Doak?
Yes.
Trustee Donnelly?
Yes.
Trustee Irwin?
Yes.
Trustee Gardner,
Yes.
trustee Cates,
Yes.
trustee McMahon,
Yes.
trustee Martin. Trustee Martin,
Yes.
trustee Riley,
Yes,
trustee Rotundo.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
great. Thank you all. Let's turn it back to President Farini Monday to talk about the athletic field improvements at the University of Maine.
Thank you very much. This is in this continuing stream of good news from the University of Maine and good progress on long planned capital activities here. So I will look to Joanne Yastrzemski to talk with you about this resolution, which is to enable us to get started on some of the Alphonse supported athletics improvements. Joanne.
Thank you, President Farini-Mundy. Good morning, everyone. So this is the first phase of the Alphon grant projects for our athletic program, our D1 athletic program, and this is 3 athletic fields, all women's sports. The first one is the soccer field, which we do not have a soccer field right now. That is the largest project because that's starting from scratch. The women's soccer team plays on the men's baseball field, I believe. And then there are the other 2 women's sports, softball and field hockey, that have fields, but that need significant renovations to those fields. So we're very early on in the project planning for these athletic fields. But the point is that we're coming to you today for a $14 million request because we have the funding from the Harold Alphon grant and matching gifts, and also because we'd like to do those projects this summer. They were planned in the timeline for the Alphon grant to be done this summer, this fall, but what really the time frame is now to get your approval so that we can go out to bid as early as March and to then go forward with as much as we can get done with the money that we have within this $14 million amount by this summer into this fall. Like I mentioned, the Harold Alphon grant is providing most of this funding over the next couple of years. And the match as well that's required, which we're doing very well on the match, raising the money. And if we move a little faster than the Harold Alphon funds or the matching funds come in, we will borrow up to a year from cash reserves in order to fund these projects and keep them on schedule. I believe that is my high points to present to you today, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Joanne. Questions? Joanne, do we have any more granular sense of how close we are to the match, how that's coming?
I see great news almost monthly. We got another gift, I think about $1 million within the last few weeks. I think what we're on track with had a match through for year 23 required of $2 million. I think we're on track with that or even ahead of that, but I can't give you those specifics right now.
Great, good, thank you. Questions, comments? Okay, I just assume that we are ready for the resolution, which is that the Finance, Facility and Technology Committee approves the following resolution to be forwarded to the consent agenda for the Board of Trustees approval at the January board meeting. That the Board of Trustees accepts the recommendation of the FFT Committee and authorizes the University of Maine system acting through the University of Maine to expend up to $14 million to construct and make improvements to the soccer, softball, and field hockey venues and continue planning and design of the overall athletic master plan. Funding for this work will be from the Harold Alphon Foundation grant funding and matching contributions. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Peggy, Trustee Rotundo. Second?
Second.
Second by Trustee Donnelly. Ellen?
Trustee Kane,
Yes.
trustee Doak, trustee Doak, trustee Donnelly,
Yes.
Trustee Irwin,
Yes.
trustee Gardner,
Yes.
trustee Cates,
Yes.
trustee McMahon,
Yes.
trustee Martin,
Yes?
trustee Riley,
Yes?
trustee Rotundo.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Thanks, Ellen. Thank you, everybody. We are in the remarkable position of being ahead of schedule. I hope our concern about the schedule hasn't quieted people. This is usually a chatty committee.
Trish,
Trustee Cates? Yep.
thank you. Can I just take up a moment of that extra time here? I'm trying, and I apologize, I came in late after Chip had begun his presentation. But in looking at attachment C on the capital, how we do capital budgeting, and I'm completely in favor of the project we just voted, by the way, but am I reading that correctly, that the projects that are over $5 million are supposed to be considered twice by this committee and then 3 times by the Board of Trustees as a whole? And have we just done that?
Chip?
Yes, so for the very largest projects, those over 5 million, the board has asked us to follow what essentially amounts to a 3-step process, Trustee Cates. First is to give the FFT committee a heads up, and then that flows to the board normally through its minutes, if nothing else. Secondly, a true reading at the FFT, where the FFT would vote to move it to the Board of Trustees. And then the further distinction for the very largest projects is when they get to the full BOT, the intention is that they get a full briefing at the BOT, not a consent agenda approval. So I'm trying to do forgive me for not connecting the dots here on the project that you just handled. I defer to Carolyn for comments on that. But as to the general process, that is the general process that we do try to follow and we should be following.
Yeah, if I could just add, I think it's a little, typically we would do those in a back-to-back setting. So, we have an FFT meeting and we talk about it, and the next FFT meeting, it shows up as an action item. I think this one we proceeded maybe slightly different than what we have done since we put this policy in place. One, because I think the schedule that Joanne talked about, we want to get things rolling. But I think the biggest reason is we've spent a lot of time talking about the Alphon projects, the $5 million number, and kind of the rationale that we came up with that was we didn't want to surprise the committee. We didn't want to be in a position where we were coming to you, with little to no notice and saying, here's a $9 million project, please approve it by the end of the meeting. We wanted you to at least have some awareness of these capital projects before we asked you to vote on them. So I don't know if we threaded the needle exactly perfect on this particular one, but that was that's the rationale, at least, behind that multi-step process.
No, and I understand, and I know that this whole topic's is no news to any of us, but it kind of seems like we are not following our own policy. And I don't have a problem in waiving the policy in this particular case, but if we're going to have a policy, then it seems to me we ought to at least follow it, or we ought to recognize that we're not following it and vote not to follow it in a situation like this.
Good point. Thank you. It is true. I think we all overlooked it. Thank you, Trustee Cates, because it's an area we've talked so much about. Do you suggest then that we want to amend? Do we need to do anything formally here, or just put in the minutes that we need to make sure that we're consistent and that we're waiving it here?
I'm certainly not suggesting any formal change, just that when matters like this come up, we refer back to what our policy is and make sure we're following it, or we're deciding intentionally not to follow it.
Yep, very good point. Gardner?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure, because we've got a lot of projects, but my memory serves me correct. I think we did do the proper steps with this project as it came to the committee for approval. Then it went to the board for full approval. And what we're doing now is just approving the spending as it's been developing along.
Okay. I think that's right. Thank you. Anybody else?
If I could just point out, we will rectify all of that by the time the board votes and give you a full explanation. I would also say that this is a grouping of projects as well, and we'll point out which projects are more than $5 million and which projects are expected to be less. So we'll try to clean that up a little bit, and I apologize for any mistakes we may have made.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, this is a first in my tenure on the FFT that we're ahead of time when it's time for Dave Demers. He's usually our guy that we can count on to tighten an agenda. He actually has his full time here. I hope he's with us because we are ready.
Here.
Great, thank you, David. We are now going to review the FY22-23 IT capital spending plan, and David, please take it away. David Demers, the Chief Information Officer.
Thank you, Chair Riley. And I do find it unusual to be in this situation where I have the luxury of time. So I'll actually talk slow today. Thank you, everyone. Good morning to the members of the committee. On behalf of the entire University of Maine System IT team, we truly appreciate the opportunity to present the fiscal 22-23 IT capital spending plan for your consideration today. For some background and some context, in 2018, the UMS IT team developed a strategic plan really focused on improvements to our information technology infrastructure and services provided to the community in order to not only support unified accreditation, but also to enhance overall operational efficiency and reliability. With that strategic plan, the IT leadership team identified several critical needs requiring significant investment, including the recently approved Repaving Main Street initiative. So these, what we're talking about for this particular spending plan are things that supplement and complement that Repaving Main Street initiative. However, I do want to point out, with ever-growing reliance on information technologies and electronic tools to effectively communicate, teach, and learn, it is critical that the university promote and maintain data and systems that are effective, accessible, reliable, and resilient. In addition, the security and protection of the university's data remains a key priority despite the never-ending and constantly evolving threat of cyber attacks. In light of these priorities, we are pleased to present to you a $3.945 million capital spending plan designed to focus on both deferred and emerging technology needs in 4 critical areas. And those are disaster recovery and business continuity, enhanced information security, improved network reliability, and enhanced change management and incident response tools. The detailed breakdown of each project with estimated costs is presented in the board packet. For the sake of time and efficiency, I'm just going to highlight a few key projects included on this list. The first one is expanding our consolidated enterprise storage and server virtualization infrastructure. That's going to facilitate our ability to ensure server backup and offsite replication functionality. This, in effect, serves to enhance our enterprise failover capacity and ensure business continuity in the event of a disaster in or near the Orono data center, which of course we all hope does not happen. The second one is investment in a commercial digital forensics platform, along with improved network firewall services that will facilitate Network Maine and Information Security Office's ability to detect, trace, isolate, and respond to cyber threats. Cyber attacks, you probably have all seen it in the news, have been on the rise, particularly in higher education, where more legacy systems and protection measures are in place. And we need to ensure protection of our sensitive data, and the need for this has never been greater. So an investment in that space is critical. The third one is with the recently completed wireless infrastructure project and the recently approved wireless maintenance project. The overall need for improved IP address management has become critical. We have survived for about 25 years now using a homegrown solution that provides IP addresses for connected devices. And while serving its purpose admirably, it has truly reached the limit of its capabilities. A commercial solution will offer enhanced network access while improving network security and operational efficiency. The last one that I'm going to point out is directly tied to the Repaving Main Street initiative. And with the breadth of offices and stakeholders that will be impacted by the repaving Main Street project, the need for a robust enterprise-wide service and change management platform is critical. By incorporating all documentation for the new Main Street environment that we will be developing in a service management platform, that's going to allow us to be much better positioned to respond to and resolve service incidents in a timely fashion. I'd like to point out the funding for these projects in total is included in the request, has been identified and secured from temporary investment income, and is available immediately to support all of these efforts. With that, I'd be happy to embellish on any of the specific projects included in the request or address any questions that you may have.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, David. We've never heard you talk that slowly. It's wonderful.
That's my instructor voice.
Questions, comments? David, I had one, and I don't expect you to answer it now, but is there a way to break out IT costs for leased space? We have, we've talked to Chip some about being able to sort of break out and look at all our leased space and our obligations. Is there a way to do that with the IT investment?
Certainly doable. It would take a little bit of going through. We did go through an exercise where we allocated costs for all of the services that we provide based on consumers of those services. So tying that to and honing it in on lease space would require us to know the lease space locations, which I don't know that I have complete insight into, but certainly would be able to run a report like that if it would be valuable.
Okay. I think it might, maybe Ryan, Chip, and I can talk a little bit about that offline.
Absolutely.
Questions for the IT plan? If not, we will go to the resolution. That the Finance, Facilities, and Technology Committee approves the following resolution to be forwarded to the Board of Trustees approval at the January board meeting. That the Board of Trustees accepts the recommendation of the FFT Committee and authorizes the University of Maine system to expend up to $3.945 million for deferred and emerging technology initiatives. The funding source will be previously earned temporary investment income. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Jim Aaron, so moved. Second, Emily Kane. Thank you.
Trustee Kane,
Yes.
Trustee Doak,
Yes.
Trustee Donnelly,
Yes.
Trustee Irwin,
Yes.
Trustee Gardner,
Yes.
Trustee Cates,
Yes.
Trustee McMahon,
Yes.
Trustee Martin,
Yes.
Trustee Riley,
Yes.
Trustee Rotundo.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next item is 300 4th Street, but I believe because we're moving ahead, we may have lost the Chancellor's. Is that right, Ryan? The Chancellor's had a previous commitment?
Sorry, I struggled to find my mute button. The Chancellor had a quick obligation at 10:30. I think it's only going to take like 10 minutes. So just wondering if we might be able to come back.
Why don't we table that for the moment and move on, if we can, if President Rice is here and ready, move on to the Wheaton Hall renovation.
Yes, I am, Madam
Great,
Chair.
thank you.
So thank you for the opportunity here. I will introduce our request here for Wadine Hall and the renovation. And then my CBO, Betsy SB Sawhill, can give more specific information. But just to give you a little bit of context here to the FFT, that we originally made a request for and were authorized for expenditures of $3,757,000 for Wadine Hall renovations through the bond that we received going on 5 years ago now, that was specifically identified for this use. In regards to over the period of time of those years, and particularly in the COVID environment here, the cost, the exploding costs of the materials, as well as the recognition of some of the very critical structural elements that had to be addressed, including basically replacement of the roof, have led to the need for an additional $2,500,000 to the original budget to bring it up to 6.2 million. I should note we already have $1.2 million in regards to a gift from a principal donor who has also gifted over $3 million to the institution over the past several years. So that's a very significant gift that is reflected as part of the term of that gift to ensure that we have the complete budget necessary to bring the project to fruition. So that will bring down the overall cost of, or the overall need to draw down on this $2.5 million request by almost 50%, or hopefully by almost 50%. I just want to underscore the need for this building, in particular Wadine Hall, as that it all pivots around activities for our athletes and several academic programs that serve the athletes or meet the needs of the athletes. And just again, to underscore the importance of athletics to this institution, since we joined the NAC 5 years ago as part of one of our main strategic initiatives to address enrollment. We've grown our athletics by 40%. We now have between 165 and 175 athletes on the campus annually. 90% of those are in our dorms, and in a COVID environment, our dorms are populated by almost 50% by our athletes. So this is the most critical use of funds in regards to capital projects we have on our campus for the progression of this institution and stabilization of both our on-campus population as well as our future budgetary projections. So that's kind of an overview for the critical nature of this building, which, you know, unfortunately has the greatest need of all of our structures that we're moving forward in regards to their utility. And I'll turn it over to my CBO to give some more specifics about the request itself.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, President Rice and Trustee Riley and all other trustees and colleagues. I think it's important to mention at the outset that Wadine Hall is over 60 years old. And so in those 60 years, it's given us great service, but it requires address immediately for safety reasons. Initially, there was review by WBRC of whether the cost to renovate or the cost to replace was appropriate. The cost to replace Wadine would be $16.5 million without the auditorium, which is attached to it, and $21 million with the auditorium. And those are 2018 numbers, which in many ways we're finding are fairly false at this time for replacement costs. We began the project last summer and did the electrical service upgrade. The service upgrade is $160,000 with the soft cost of $1.3 million. It was decided as the project began that we would split it into 2 years. And the reason for that at the time was because we need to serve our athletes, our athletic teams, and our athletic programs. So the population demands access during certain times, and we don't want to limit that access. We've looked at the infrastructure upgrades, which will now cost $4,735,000, and that includes the roof and replacement of the roof and steel upgrades to meet building codes. We have to put in much larger concrete footers, and we have to take out almost all of the flooring, which means then that we have to put in new flooring. We've got to take care of all the finishes. We have fire protection upgrades, a boiler upgrade, and basic gymnasium equipment. I would love to say that this outcome gives us a brand new facility, but what it does is it fixes an old facility so that it would be useful for the next 25 years. our original funding was at 3,757,000 from the 2018 bond. And that 3,757,000 estimate was based on a 2016 estimate by WBRC. Our shortfall, given our current identification of cost, is 2,500,000. So that we are requesting a budget change of 6,257,000 for the total budget and an internal loan of 2.5 million over 10 years. However, that internal loan will be diminished by all directed donations, and our current directed donation is 1.2 million based on receipt of support from the board of a $2.5 million loan. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Betsy.
I'm happy to help.
Questions for the Wadine Hall proposal?
Madam Chair, I wonder if it wouldn't be helpful while folks are thinking about questions if I just briefly explain the internal loan piece. We haven't done one in a while, and I don't know that we have any board members who have been around for that. So board policy and our administrative practice letters do allow for internal loans from the system to campuses. We tie the interest rates to those to the Treasury rate. So for purposes of this conversation, when we had when we've done some of the work with Betsy and her team at Presque Isle, that rate was 1.43% on November 30th. Going back to 2001, we've done 9 of these different loans. The terms are fairly flexible. We work with Tracy, our controller, and the campuses to really figure out what works best for the campuses, what works for the system. As I said, we've done 9 of these. 4 of them have had terms of 5 years. Those ones tend to be smaller, smaller projects. 4 of them have been at 8 years. And even back in 2002, we did a 20-year one, which I can see must be coming right up at Machias for some residence hall renovations there. So it's not unusual. I believe the last couple that we've done have been at USM. We did one several years ago for some Wi-Fi upgrades in residence halls. We've done a couple at UMA. Back in 2008, we UMFK purchased the Sear House and took out an internal loan for that for 5 years. So it's not unusual. We work with the campuses. Again, in this case, we would make arrangements so that payments started in I think in 2024 was what we were thinking here. So not a huge portion of this. Again, as Betsy and President Rice said, we do look to bring down the amount based on donor funds that are coming in. We just quite don't have those in hand yet, and we wanted to be prepared for the highest number. So that's why we're putting that in front of you as well.
Thanks, Ryan. Helpful.
Can I just add to what Ryan said? And as Ryan said, this is not unusual for the system. It is unusual for the institution. It's the first time we've requested one that I can remember in my memory here. And my thanks to Ryan and Tracy for their assistance with Betsy in making this request.
Great. Any other questions, concerns? And I would like to say that Ray and Betsy did a wonderful job. I had an opportunity to tour this building just so that I could be convinced about the efficacy of this request. Seeing no further questions.
I'm sorry.
Yep, sorry.
Can I ask one?
Trustee Cates, yep.
Thank you. It's really for Ryan, and thank you for walking us through that because I haven't heard one of these before. So how does the loan get repaid? Is it from any particular income stream from the campus, or how does that work?
Yeah, so fairly flexible. I'll let Betsy talk specifically about this one, but it would be like any other budget line. I've got a $500,000 obligation. I've got to pay the system, and so somewhere in one of my interest lines, there's a $500,000 debt service that's set aside. We're talking about a smaller amount here, but it would be like you would expect, a part of the budget process and budget allocation. We, for our own sake, obviously, obviously we would want to know that, that Betsy and Ray are budgeting to pay us back as well. So I don't know if you want to talk about anything specific to this one, Betsy.
Only that it's important that I make the note for everyone listening that it is our intention to offset the loan with directed donations. Having the $1.2 million directed donation brings us down to an actual borrowing of $1.3 million. We are working on other directed donations so that it's our goal not to have an internal loan at all by 2024. But obviously the reason for being able to make sure that all of the funding in place is an internal loan. And the reason that we would like to get all of this accomplished this summer, this fall, before the basketball season, as we all know, being able to take care of our students is urgent. So the notion is being able to speed it up with the internal loan, but not releasing our obligation from collecting funds from potential donors.
Thank you.
All set.
Madam Chair,
Trustee Donnelly?
just quick question, maybe not as quick an answer. When I was a student there, Wadine Hall, and Dr. Wadine was still kicking around town, was the center of the student life. It was where you went to shows, you went to watch sporting events. It was where you had the cafeteria, not the cafeteria, but the snack bar, and lots of other things where we gathered to warm up in between classes. With the Miss Gentile building behind, and it was also where the exercise center was. With what kind of activities are still going on there, and what has been moved to other buildings that have been expanded and grown? So what's the future use other than basketball for the building? What else are we doing there?
Yeah, I can give a quick, well, I don't know if it's a quick, I'll give a truncated response to that complex answer, but you're right. Since that time, which wasn't too long ago, Trustee Donnelly, that you describe, we of course have the campus center, which is the center for dining, for special activities and group meetings, as well as for student group meetings. The snack bar is up in the campus center now, as well as certain offices and functions like admissions, et cetera. So, and then as you noted, Gentile Hall is really the exercise center, which is both for the community and houses the only indoor pool besides Limestone in the county at this point in time. And also serves, as I said, it serves both the campus community as well as the local community needs in regards to fitness and the pool in particular, including it's the only location for training and swimming and for K through 12 students as well. We have a agreement with the city for all that kind of work as well. So Wadine Hall is now primarily the sports center. So we do have all of the indoor sports take place in Wadine Hall over the course of the year. So as well as all of the indoor practices take place in Wadine Hall. And that's the main portion that will include the work that has to happen with this request. So that includes the gymnasium floor, and it includes all of the program offices, such as the athletic training, the physical therapy building, the physical therapy locations as well. So, and again, those are all allied programs associated with athletics. The other part of the building, of course, is the auditorium, and that is a future project, which again, the auditorium is also community facing. So outside of a COVID environment, for instance, the community players perform in the auditorium, as well as other cultural events. That's a follow-up capital project that we plan on addressing, but only after we get this principal project completed. So we've kind of diversified in those three major buildings in regards to student life and community life, but Wadine Hall remains the principal venue for all of those sorts of indoor activities and indoor competitions, whether it's basketball, volleyball, etc.
Thank you. And
It may also be useful to you to know that most of the athletic faculty and team is moving into Normal Hall. So our choreography for this has us using the 3 classrooms on the first floor of Normal Hall in order to do PT and in order to do teaching, with all of the athletic faculty offices above them. So it's a good thing we still have Normal Hall in place in order to take care of this renovation.
thank you.
And of course, once that's completed, it allows us to empty out Normal Hall so we can then address that building, which will no longer be necessary, which will make Chip happy.
Could I just ask one question? Could I ask one question? When Jim Donnelly was at the university, was the building lit by torches or electricity?
Ooh.
So when 2 of your trustees, Trustee Doak and I were there, they did have electricity, but it was a newfangled thing, and indoor plumbing was on its way into fashion. It was a great school. And if you'll indulge me with just a quick Clifford O.T. Wadine story, Dr. Wadine was 98 years old and walking around town, and Miss Gentile was in her 80s and shoveled his walkway every snowstorm on her way to school. And she never missed a day of work in her 50 years at UMPI, 60 years at UMPI. She was a remarkable woman. But Dr. Wadine, I asked one day how he was doing, and it's I quote this frequently when people are having a tough day. He said, "Jim, any day I can swing my feet off the bed and stand erect. I jump up, click my heels, and say, yippee, I got another one." So hopefully we all start each day with a little Clifford O.T. Wadine, what lies ahead during the day. And with that, Madam Chair, I will turn off my mic.
We need that. Thank you. And I want to, especially because we didn't spend a lot of time with Chip on all the great discussions, I want to thank Trustee Cates. I think it is a reminder always as we think about capital planning that whenever we borrow funds or internal loans or bonds, the source of revenues to pay them back becomes a critically important question given the challenges we have balancing our budgets. So an issue of great concern to this committee, and I thank you, Trustee Cates, for reminding us. So with that, is there anything else on Wadine Hall? Let me turn to the resolution. That the Finance, Facility, and Technology Committee approves the following resolution to be forwarded to the consent agenda of the Board of Trustees to be approved on the January 24th meeting. That the Board of Trustees accepts the recommendation of FFT and authorizes the University of Maine system acting through the University of Maine at Presque Isle to increase the total renovation budget of the Wadine Hall renovation to $6,257,000 and to approve an internal loan of up to $2.5 million for the Wheaton Hall renovation. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Trustee Doak and seconded by, did you get that? Donnelly. Good. That's great. That's fabulous. Thank you. Ellen?
Trustee Kane? Trustee Kane?
Oh, yes, I said yes. Sorry, I must have hit my mute button at the same time. Apologies.
Trustee Doak?
Yes.
Trustee Donnelly?
Yes.
Trustee Irwin?
Yes.
Trustee Gardner?
Yes.
Trustee Cates?
Yes.
Trustee McMahon?
Yes.
Trustee Martin?
Yes.
Trustee Riley?
Yes.
Trustee Rotundo?
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Thank you, Ellen. Let's go back in the agenda. The Chancellor's back from his meeting and look at the issue before us, 304th Street renovation and the fit-out increase for UMaine and the UMaine School of Law. Chancellor.
Thank you. By way of introduction, we have a number of people who can speak to the issue, including Lee Softly, who's doing an absolutely outstanding job as the Dean of the Law School, Ryan, whose work you are well aware of, Joan Ferland, who's also been integral in the project. Clearly, finding an up-to-code and up-to-date facility for the law school and the MBA program has been a high priority. Because of the pandemic, perhaps we discovered an option that would not have presented itself before us unless that had happened. On the other hand, there is a downside to the pandemic, and that is that costs have risen substantially. I will remind everyone that we not only have the right to lease this facility for 10 years, we also have the right to purchase this portion of that building, this condominium portion of that building as well, at a price that, quite frankly, could not have been obtained pre-pandemic. And I'm willing to bet will substantially undercut what this value will be, what the value of this building will be whenever we do, in fact, if we do exercise our option. Again, I think that moving these educational initiatives to the right types of surroundings presumably will allow those programs to excel and to be enlarged if that's to be had. And with that, I'll turn it back to Ryan, to Dean Softly, and the president of the University of Maine as well.
Ryan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just to bring the committee up to speed of where we are and what we're looking for today. As a reminder, in your board materials, you'll see this in September of 2021. The board did authorize an additional $6 million authorization for us to move forward. We are coming to you today looking to increase that amount by 5.5 million to bring that total up to 11.5 million. Want to be clear, very transparent. We do not actually think that is the final number. We think that final number will probably be something closer to 13.5 million plus or minus. But the 11.5 million represents a couple of things. One, it represents the resources that we have on hand. So that's critical. We did not want to come to you and ask for authorization above what we had for resources. And it, more importantly, or as importantly, it keeps the project on time, along the schedule that we're looking for. We have a very aggressive schedule here. And so we've had lots of internal conversations over the last couple of weeks. And one of those was, well, why come today to the committee when it's 11.5? Why not wait until March? Maybe we'll have more details. We'll know what the final number is. It's just lost time. We've got a guaranteed maximum price that we need to act on. You can imagine in the environment that we're in, the lead time for IT equipment, for furniture, for all of those type things is much longer than it was. And so we simply we're concerned that if we waited until March to come to you with this request, we would lose time and jeopardize that fall date. So we're asking for that additional 5.5 million of authorization today. We fully expect to be back in front of this committee. Ideally, we'll make it all the way till March and won't bump up against our authorization limits. The sources of the 11.5 million, 8 million in system resources, 2.5 million from the University of Maine. That is roughly represents, we think at the end of the day that the University of Maine will occupy about 20% of that space. That's roughly 20% of the renovation costs. But it could be less, it could be more. And so we'll reconcile that when we have that. And then a $1 million private donation. So that's the finance piece and what we're looking for today. Let me turn it over to Dean Softly to see what she would like to add. And then I think all of us are happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Dean Softly.
Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity to talk about this just an amazing opportunity for the university system. And you've heard briefly from the Chancellor and you've heard from us before, but after a 16-year search for a new facility for the law school and its partners, which searches had been entirely unsuccessful. And then after beginning the design potential for a brand new building that would be somewhere in the area of 70 to 90 million to do what we needed, we came upon this amazing opportunity right in the middle of the court system, the business area in Portland, and right on the edge of the blue economy, at a time when the ability to get into the building at an advantageous cost was absolutely wonderful. It has created a challenging project for the university, and I want to be just very clear that the Chancellor's persistent support for this particular project has meant all the difference in the world. You've heard that Ryan has been absolutely wonderful working with us. President Fridi Monday, who's been my mentor dean, has been creative and helpful throughout. But it has taken hours and hours of everyone's time to make sure that this project will be everything we hope it will be, and will bring the opportunities that we all saw when we first went through the building. And what's happened over the last 6 months, as we have really begun to look at the design of the building, is that it's very clear this is even a greater game changer than we originally anticipated. So just quickly, this building will allow the law school to expand its class size by as much as 15%. It will allow us to create a whole system of distance learning, which will benefit the master's business program, the law school, and the University of Maine programs. And again, the marvelously fast-talking David Demers has been wonderful in helping us find the right technology so we can, in fact, move directly into the future. And perhaps most important of all, it finally brings together under one roof all of the system pieces around the Graduate and Professional Center that will move us light years forward in collaborating around cross-disciplinary education. We've done everything that we can to keep the costs from going up as we've watched the material costs and the subcontracting costs going up. We're working with a wonderful contractor. Just today, as we were talking about earlier projects, I received information that they're engaged in value engineering around that guaranteed maximum price. They've already found about 200,000 of savings as we're working toward keeping those costs as tightly controlled as we possibly can. But in the end, what the university will have is an asset and an opportunity that will allow us to move forward really light years from where we are in all of these programs. And so this particular authorization today, if the FFT moves it forward to the board, will allow us to finally begin construction, which will be at a breakneck pace throughout the spring and summer, getting us all into that building in the fall. As you know, I can talk forever about the exciting opportunities. I'll stop.
Thank you for both the presentation and stopping. Questions for Ryan, the Chancellor, or Dean Softly? Comments?
Madam Chair.
Trustee Donnelly.
Dean Softly, congratulations on a nice building, good plans, and the layout, and thank you for the tour and kind of showing me the vision that you have. And just question on when you've gone through and kind of you're doing some of the design, have you kind of tightened up on some of what you had planned when we walked through on office space and the way light was coming in? And just curious how the plans and outlook were developing.
Thank you, Trustee Dunley. And in fact, I thank you for the tour of the Bangor Savings Facility, which helped us envision quite a bit better how we can assure that this building, which as you've seen, as we've projected, it has lots of wonderful natural light flooding into the building. What we don't want to do is create a building where there are dark corridors. So looking at what Bangor Savings had done, the office spaces will have front walls that are almost entirely glass, and the light will flood in both into the corridors and into any of the internal spaces. The design and the contractors have worked together to make sure that we're doing the very best that we can do to maximize that natural light. I don't know how many of you are aware of it, but the 3 primary classrooms in the building I'm sitting in right now are internal rooms. There is no natural light whatsoever for students sitting in those classrooms for hours at a time. Every classroom in the new building, and there will be 5 beautiful classrooms with additional seminar space. All of those will have natural light. And with the offices that will be in place for all of the professionals that will be in this building, those offices will also be designed in such a way that the building will remain bright and well lit throughout the day. I love the way the architects will show you where the sun goes around the building, how we make sure all of that works. But I'm very grateful, Trustee Donnelly, for your help and advice, and we're actually moving forward on all of those plans at this point.
Great. Other questions or comments? We're ready for the resolution. I will read it. That the Finance, Facilities, and Technology Committee approves the following resolution to be forwarded to the consent agenda for the Board of Trustees approval at the January 24th board meeting. That the Board of Trustees accepts the recommendation of the FFT Committee and authorizes the University of Maine and the University of Maine School of Law, acting through the University of Maine system, to expend an additional $5.5 million for a total of $11.5 million for the design, permitting, renovation, and fit-out of space at 300 4th Street, Portland. The funding sources will be gifts and other sources as identified by the Vice Chancellor for Finance and Administration and Treasurer and the Chancellor. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Trustee Kane, second?
Second.
Seconded by Trustee Rotundo. Ellen?
Trustee Kane,
Yes.
Trustee Doak,
Yes.
Trustee Donnelly,
Yes.
Trustee Irwin,
Yes.
Trustee Gardner,
Yes.
Trustee Cates,
Yes.
Trustee McMahon,
Yes.
Trustee Martin,
Yes.
Trustee Riley,
Yes?
Trustee Rotundo.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Great, thank you. Good luck, Lee. Keep working.
Thank you all so much.
Great. Let's move on to tab 12 and turn to President Freeney Mundy and Vice Chancellor for Administration and Finance, Ryan Lowe, to hear about the Tri-Maine and the Maine Jobs and Recovery capital projects. It's an update. You saw it in the board book, some interesting developments. Joan, are you kicking it off?
Ryan's going to kick it off.
Okay.
Yep. So thank you, Madam Chair. You've heard a lot from me today, so I'm going to be fairly brief in my comments this morning, but just want to talk a little bit about what we were, a little bit of background and what we were hoping to accomplish in this morning's update, and then we'll defer to Joan on some of the specifics. And so I think everyone is aware by now of the federal resources, the conversations that we've been having. Incredibly grateful for the support from the administration. We talked before about the state's plan to invest its share of the American Rescue Plan. We've talked before about the $35 million allocation to the system and the legislative approval process and all of that. So I won't spend a ton of time, but almost similar to the way we teed up today's meeting, which was, before we brought you a bunch of capital projects, we spent a little bit of time kind of reflecting on changes that we have made over the last 7 or 8 years in capital projects, and just kind of wanted you to have that context as you started seeing projects come up more and more, the record-setting investment that Chip talked about. Well, we tried to really accomplish the same thing with the overview that we're doing this morning on these federal funds. We are getting to the point now, very productive conversations that we've been having with some of our partners in state government. Huge kudos to Sam Warren and all the work that she's doing, keeping Joan and I organized and following all of this, and as well to Jason Charlin and the team at the University of Maine. And so what we were looking to accomplish this morning was to present at a high level some of these projects that you're going to see come forward. Some are going to come forward as agenda items literally right after we finish this tab. Others will be coming over the next couple of months, over the summer. And so we thought it might make sense before they started showing up to just talk about them at high level, and the opportunities that we think these resources will make. So if I think I'm going to screen share here, if I can do this. And, play button here. Okay, again, so I talked about this. I think everyone, again, is aware of the allocation and the process that we've been going through to date. I think it does present some really unique opportunities. And so let me turn it over to Joan to talk about what some of those opportunities are, not just at individual campuses, but probably more importantly, the opportunities we have across the system working together on several of these.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you everybody for the time on this today. What we wanted to do, as Ryan said, is to provide sort of our overarching framework as a reference for you, given that these will be coming through in different ways in different time periods, and you'll be hearing about them as we go forward. I'd echo the thanks to Sam Warren and to Jason Charland, and to the teams that are leading these 10 projects, which includes individuals across the entire system. And although these are 10 separate projects, each of which has their own special site with the state of Maine as they are putting forward the materials that have to go in relative to review and being able to actually start to access these dollars. And that's a very elaborate process right now underway. That said, we are working to think of this as one coherent set of opportunities that are coming together across the system that will take advantage of our unified accreditation tool, because they will allow students opportunities to develop their workforce preparation and potential skills in key areas. And basically the strategy for the projects that we're talking about here are that these are capital projects with workforce focus at the same time and integrated together. We heard something about that earlier. I think something that Chip said about the importance of integrating instruction and planning as we think about our capital planning. And so these have been designed that way. The notion is that we work to have a state-of-the-art facility in some key areas that we'll mention briefly, and then at the same time, make those facilities work so that they are able to support the education of students who might go to work in those industries, where they are able to learn through experience, through research learning, in close proximity to the science, the R&D, the engineering that will be going on in the facilities themselves. So it's really quite an interesting, I think, system-wide move to say we're really going to be serious about serving the state of Maine through these kinds of facilities with student learning at the center as well. There are 10 projects in this set. 6 of them have capital needs, and that's where we'll focus today. 4 are strictly workforce focused. I'm only going to very briefly mention each of the 6. So if Ryan could go to the next slide, please. You've heard about GEM before. This is the project led by Habib Dagher. It would be the a centerpiece really for much of our work in engineering and computing as we go forward here, both at the University of Maine and across the state. And you'll see here, note that 15 million is requested from, as they say, MEJRP, the Maine Jobs Recovery Plan. 15 million that would come from there, and the rest of the dollars will need to come from other sources. And there's active work going on right now across multiple entities to try to seek those dollars. And when you would likely next see this would be fall of 22. Next slide, please. The Sustainable Aquaculture Workforce and Innovation Center, a facility again on the Orono campus, seeking 3.5 million from MEJRP, with other sources listed here, work going on to seek those funds right now, summer 22. Again, a workforce training activity tied directly to a kind of state-of-the-art center that is needed for applied research and business development. Next one, please. The Aroostook Farm Research and Education Center, which is a partnership between the University of Maine and the University of Maine at Presque Isle. We are looking for 3 million from MEJRP. We would bring that to you in the summer of 22. Same basic idea, an R&D facility that would serve as an incredibly important site for student learning. Food Innovation Cluster and the Food Quality Laboratory would be a UMaine facility led by Cooperative Extension, Dean Carter, seeking, I believe, 2.5 from MEJRP. Other funds, again, good work underway to try to seek those funds. A very important area statewide, actually, post-pandemic or I guess we're not post-pandemic, continuing pandemic as we do look at issues of food security and food safety. Summer of 22 coming to you. And then the last two that we'll mention are coming to you today. So I won't say a lot about them. You'll hear more. The Dubiak Center at the University of Southern Maine for Digital Science and Innovation. Next slide, please. And the Sweat Winter Early Childhood Education Center at the University of Maine at Farmington, which I think is the project of all of these that's moving most quickly through our review process. So great work by that team to keep this moving through this multi-step process. Next slide, please. The other projects that are in this set to bring us to the 35 million are just quickly listed here. One will be a competition, a set of funds available to the small campuses, very focused on talent workforce development. That's in process as we go now. An innovation hub, Rural Career Pathway Center, and then at Machias with the Down East Institutes, a set of internships. All of these, by the way, are well aligned with the Harold Alfond Foundation UMS Transforms activity, either in the areas of student success or Maine Center or engineering, computing, and information science. So very exciting initiative, and we wanted to give you a quick picture of it at a large level. I'm also going to just pivot very quickly here and call on my colleague Jake Ward to say a bit about a related effort, which is an opportunity for funding through the through EDA for Build Back Better. And I'll turn it to Jake.
Thank you, Joan. The Department of Commerce EDA, Economic Development Administration, created a program with their American Rescue Funds last summer, about $1 billion overall, to do regional cluster development, economic recovery. The first phase were $500,000 planning grants. There were 529 applications that were submitted in October, and UMaine team leading a coalition called For Maine, Forest Opportunity Roadmap for Maine, received a $500,000 planning grant that results in us leading up to a phase 2 competition for up to $100 million. And those proposals are due in March 15th, 2022. One of the reasons that we wanted to bring this to your attention today is the short time frame in preparing these applications. And a couple of these applications do have facilities constructions going with those. Next slide. The overall coalition's goal is really to take the Maine forest bioeconomy into the next level. We, the state, the nation, really see the forest biomaterials as being a source of materials as this country and the world move away from fossil fuel oriented plastics and other materials, longer term carbon sequestration issues, and how the forest has been really a key to the underpinning of the Maine economy since it's before it was a state. The bullets here list the types of projects that we're talking about across the whole thing, including workforce development, industrial site redevelopment, emerging technologies, and market attraction. A total of 8 projects. UMaine will lead 3, and 2 of those are construction. The construction projects are GEM, as previously discussed. It's another source of funding for GEM, and a new project around Jeunesse Hall. Could I have the next slide? So since you've already seen the slide on GEM, we are looking at through EDA about $25 to $30 million proposal to add into the package, the capital stack for GEM. This one, this project, Biomaterials Innovation Center, is a new project. It would be addition on to Jeunesse Hall to further expand the process development center into areas that are specifically looking at how to use Maine fiber in replacement for things like packaging and other materials, composite structures, building materials, and advanced biomaterials. Again, this is a potentially a $30 million scale of project. We're looking at $24 million from EDA. We have other sources looking at. If funded, we would have that funding in September of 2022, and thus we would come back to the Board of Trustees, FFT, in the fall with any planning to go forward.
Great presentation, very exciting. Thank you. Jake, can I ask just a quick question? Obviously, congratulations to all to become a finalist in this very competitive process. But of the 60 finalists, do we have any idea of how many final awards there will be?
They're expected to be about 30 final awards out of the 60.
That's a good.
And the amount of funding could be $75 to $100 million.
Great. Okay, very exciting. Questions, comments? Great presentation. Trustee Cates?
Thank you. Could I just ask Jake or someone to explain a little bit more I think it's called the Talent Research and Innovation Small Campus Competition. Is that each of the small campuses can submit a proposal? How does that work, and what's the timeline on that, if you could?
I'll let Joan answer that one.
I'll take that one, Trustee Cates. Thanks. Yes, it's exactly that. We already have sent out a query to the smaller campuses to see what they might have for ideas relative to workforce development that is aligned with the kinds of needs expressed in documents like the Economic Recovery Plan for the state of Maine, the workforce, the Economic Strategic Plan for the state of Maine, and so forth. So those ideas have been developed a bit already on our small campuses, and we have that set of ideas sitting right now while we now work through the process with the state to be sure that this concept that we can actually meet the criteria for drawing down those funds. That has a lot to do with technical requirements by the U.S. Department of Treasury and how these awards will be audited and monitored. So all of our teams are working on their proposals right now, including the one for our own mini grant competition. And once that comes through, we will be then back in touch to look for ways not only to see how we can fund those ideas that have already been generated, but to see if there are more ideas coming from the campuses. We'll hope to encourage collaborations across these campuses, perhaps even with some of these other facilities that are coming in online, we hope, and use this as a chance to, again, test out our unified accreditation possibilities more fully. So all in development right now, and I know the presidents and the dean of the law school are very attentive to when the time might come to be able to seek explicit funding from this project.
Thanks.
Yeah.
What's that project? Anybody else? Questions?
If I could just mention, Madam Chair, I think it will help with the upcoming agenda items. Tab 13 and tab 15, as President Farini Monday mentioned, are going to be the first 2 projects that you're going to see that are here for the approval process. And we've talked a couple of times about that extensive process that the state is appropriately requiring us to go through. And all of these projects are at various levels of that. And so the way that we've drafted the resolutions for number 13 and number 15, you'll see is that we are asking the board or this committee and then the board to approve those dollar amounts, to approve us moving forward with these projects. But we've included some language that says it doesn't allow the campus to go all the way, if you will, until my office in consultation with Sam and President Farini Monday has determined that the state is the state is all good. When the state has finally said, okay, and they're getting ready to write out the oversized check, at that point, we will essentially release the funds or allow the campus to move forward. So we are looking for that approval from the committee so that these projects can move forward on the aggressive timelines they are, but we won't officially pull the trigger until the state has told us, here's the funds.
Thanks for the clarification. But before we move on, anything else for Vice Chancellor Fernie Mundy, Jake? Okay, exciting stuff. Thank you very much. And now back to capital. Let's move on to capital expenditures on tab 3. And as Joan has set it up for President Cummings, we want to look now at the science building renovation for the Dubiak Center expansion.
Thank you,
President
Michael, Dubiak Center is before us. It began in 2017, based on a $1 million gift from the former WEX President Michael Dubiak. The purpose of the center is threefold. First, to provide student and faculty innovation space. Secondly, to maximize interaction among the STEM disciplines in the science and technology and science College of Science and Technology. And 3, to intersect directly with business, government, hospitals, and other research institutes, most notably recently with Northeastern's Rue Institute, in which we are sharing research faculty in the center. Again, this project is contingent, as Vice Chancellor Lowe has just mentioned, upon receipt of the sufficient additional $1.5 million from federal funds as just described. I will now turn it over to Alec Porteous, our COO, to describe in more detail what the project would entail.
Thank you.
Thank you, President Cummings. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to let Dean Qualls talk in more detail about the project, but I do just want to speak quickly about the capital and financing components. Project renovates the second floor of USM's Portland campus science building, and in particular the C wing of that science building. It's developing about 6,500 square feet of underutilized open space. It would expand computer lab space considerably, at about 60 seats in that regard. And it will allow us to house our Department of Computer Science in one centralized location. Overall price tag for the project is approximately $2.5 million, and that's the authorization that we're requesting. $1 million of that is in bond funding from the 2018 voter approved bonds. We have that money in hand. Another $1.5 million would come from Maine Jobs and Recovery Plan funds. As Vice Chancellor Lowe said, that spending of that funding would be contingent, obviously, on approval from the state. So we would be waiting to hear as far as that goes. But it was important to us to move this forward as expeditiously as possible. We would like to complete the project over the summer and have it ready for the fall. And just based on supply chain and labor considerations that I think all committee members are aware of and are clearly going on out there, we would like to bid the project in March if possible. That's why we wanted to bring it before you today. So with that, let me turn things over to Dean Qualls to talk a little bit more about detail of the project.
Sure, thanks, Alec. I think this is my first time here. So my name is Jeremy Qualls. I'm the Dean of the College of Science, Technology, and Health at the University of Southern Maine. So I'm really proud and excited about this project. It actually started before I came here. I've been here about 3.5 years. So this started with a gift from Michael Dubiak to set up a Center for Digital Science and Innovation. We finished phase 1, which is phenomenal. If you're in the Portland area, let me know. I'll give you a tour of it. It's our Maker Innovation Studio. What it does is it looks at tech transfer. It looks at innovation in the broadest sense and how to get students into that area. So this second phase takes a large suite. It's actually the whole C wing second floor that's underutilized, and turns that into something that's transformative. So the question is, how do you take a space and capitalize on the opportunities at the same time addressing some of the challenges? The center is a nexus that takes care of a number of problems, right? It's a 2 birds for 1 stone kind of thing. So this will be our nexus to concentrate our research efforts, our industrial contacts, internships, all in that digital science realm, right? And so it is a place that you can imagine it where you've got faculty kind of not clustered necessarily all the way by the department, but also with their research areas. So it's like a home for a focus area. We also have strong support from industry to build up this space. The space also has a major drive to address some of the COVID issues. The K through 12 educational gaps are huge. This is really, I know it's all across Maine, but we have an opportunity right now to focus in Southern Maine. And so we can hit a lot of the learning gaps in the digital sciences. We have strong support from the K through 12 organizations here in this area. This couples with our new initiative with Tom Bickford, where we now host Maine Robotics, and we have a lot of these STEM camps. So this will be a home for a lot of our stuff like programming and logo, right? Or Minecraft. It really is a partnership, not just, for regional, but it really spreads out beyond academics. We also work strongly with the University of Maine faculty. We have a number of grants that we are doing to be housed, research work that's housed in this new center. We have partnerships right now, grants, proposals in progress with the University of Maine and with the Rue Institute. It's about 6,500 square foot. It's got 2 classrooms. It's got a tech cafe. It's got office space, which we're really short on. Portland is really suffering for housing for the faculty. So this would also alleviate that problem. Let's see. Overall, since I've been here, this is probably one of the most impressive opportunities to be a transformative experience. It really sets a facility to provide a sense of being and place for our students. And I personally believe this will have a big impact on the faculty as well. It's high visibility. When we have our tours, this is a place where, you've got people coming through, they're seeing this, it's encouraging them, it's exciting them. I don't know what else to say other than let me know what questions you have. I think it's amazing.
Thank you, and welcome to FFT. Questions for the USM team?
I have a question.
Trustee Irwin?
Yeah, actually, I have 2 questions. First is more straightforward, which is you mentioned the Rue Center. You and President Cummings both mentioned it several times, which I think is great that there's an active connection between USM and the Rue Center. I'm curious to know, is there a formal kind of pathway in place between USM and the Rue Center for like 4+1 or whatever kinds of ways in which if you successfully complete a program at USM at the bachelor level, for example, you are automatically you automatically have access to the Rue Center for graduate level work?
Yeah, I'll let Jeremy talk about the details. We now have signed 4 agreements of a 4x1, Trustee Irwin, and the idea is to flow directly from our program with just 1 year officially at Northeastern to allow them to do the master's program. But I'll let Jeremy describe perhaps each of those 4 agreements.
So we do have the 4+1s. We've got one, it's already signed, and it should start this fall in place. So we'll have our first cohort going in that's a biotech one. We have another one for artificial intelligence that's going into place. We're looking at various flavors of project management. And then I'd love to do computational linguistics. We also have a request from them to develop joint positions through the Dubiak Center. So they're on board with this one. We would advertise for this coming fall. We would advertise this year. So they would actually come in about the time of completion. So then we would have a joint positions. They would also like to sponsor Rue Fellows. So that means if we have USM faculty that are interested in doing research, they'll pay the summer salaries for doing research if it's collaborative. And so this one, I think that's very exciting. They're already having a number of communications with my faculty. And then I think the gang, they go out and get beers and stuff. And so it's got a really good spirit right now moving forward.
And Jim, you had a second question?
Yeah, I did. The second question is a little more general and probably harder to answer at this early stage, but I'm curious to know about how this will dovetail, the Dubiak Center and the programming under it will dovetail with the Maine College of Engineering, Computing, and Information Science. So there's sort of a vision. So how over time these things can flow together in a coordinated and aligned way.
Yeah, and I think it does extremely well. I'll turn that over to Jeremy though.
I think that's a great question. I'm one of the co-leads for Mises, and I think it's critical that Mises is actually supportive and has all the computational things covered. And so as we build the Dubiak Center out, I believe that it should be part of the Mises theme, right? It should work together. And so it's part of my role as a co-lead is to make sure that happens.
Great. Thank you very much.
Other questions?
Yeah, this is David. Have you given any thought to having an esports program as part of this center?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Did you say esports?
Esports, yeah. Have you thought about esports as part of this center?
Sure. So the esports, if you want to have it, you need to have a certain setup. So our setups right now are for classroom. We could do it as an esports, but the standards on your machines are slightly different. So if the esports isn't in that space, we would like to support esports, right? So it may not be in the Dubiak Center, the machines, right? So that may be in one of the other rooms or on the Gorham campus where we have the residential hall. But again, with the new residence hall coming here in Portland, maybe that isn't ideal. I think it's a great one to pursue where you would put the esports. I know Dean Williams has talked to me quite a bit about setting up an esports program. But right now, I don't know how it would fit. Yes, we could do that, but currently it's not in the works.
David, anything more? Okay. Other questions? Mark, are you looking? Anybody? All right, great. Thank you for that update. Very, very interesting. Let's move to the very, very long resolution that the Finance Facilities Technology Committee approves the following resolution to be forwarded to the consent agenda for the Board of Trustees approval January 24th board meeting. That the Board of Trustees accepts the recommendation of the FFT Committee and authorizes the University of Maine system, acting through the University of Southern Maine, to expend up to $2.5 million for renovation to expand its Michael E. Dubiak Center for Digital Science and Innovation, located on the second floor of the Science Building of the Portland campus. Funding for this project would be from Maine Jobs Recovery Funds and 2018 state bonds. The approved initial spending limit is set at $1 million, with the additional $1.5 million to be authorized by the Chancellor and the Vice Chancellor for Finance and Administration and Treasurer, contingent upon obtaining confirmation of the state jobs recovery funds. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Trustee Rotundo, seconded by Trustee Kane.
Trustee Kane?
Yes.
Trustee Doak?
Yes.
Trustee Donnelly?
Yes.
Trustee Irwin?
Yes.
Trustee Gardner?
Yes.
Trustee Kate?
Yes.
Trustee McMahon?
Yes.
Trustee Martin?
Yes.
Trustee Riley?
Yes.
Trustee Rotundo?
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Great. Thank you all. I think President Cummings, you're still on for the science building renovation.
Thank you. This is specific to, thank you, Madam Chair. This is specific to the Interprofessional Education Center, which unites many of our health-centered disciplines, nursing, athletics, science, exercise science, leisure and recreation, master's in occupational therapy, with a unified approach to patient care as well as interacting in research. So I'll turn it over to Jeremy. Excuse me, let me start with Alec and see if he wants to add any financial context, and then he'll pass it on to Jeremy.
Thank you, President Cummings. Same thing here, just wanted to provide a little bit of project detail, and then I'll turn it over to Jeremy for another more involved discussion. In this case, as the President said, we're creating an interprofessional education lab, or IPE, by renovating the basement level of the same C wing of our science building. Be about a 2,400 square foot project. In particular, it would build out a flex room for debriefing, for classroom and lab space, and then a second smaller debrief and collaboration room, as well as a welcome center. And then it would replace parts of our HVAC and replace lighting for greater efficiency, particularly around energy usage. Project is expected to cost up to $900,000. That's an authorization we're requesting. We have that all in gift funds on hand, and same timeline for the project, same considerations around construction schedule. We'd like to bid this in March and then begin work in May, with completion no later than August. And really, this project and the one you just heard about represent an exciting transformation of that C wing, the newer wing of USM's Portland Science Building. And as I turn it over to Dean Qualls, just a credit to him and his team for their entrepreneurialism, and for really identifying an underutilized asset at USM, and then linking that with exciting projects and donors to support them. So let me turn it over to Dean Qualls.
Thanks, Alec. This space is derelict space. In fact, it was the remnant of the applied medical wing. So we used to have a program, applied medical sciences, and then when that was phased out, left behind was basically wreckage. So you have a basement space that was underutilized. It wasn't utilized at all. In fact, it was sealed off because we had, it wasn't plumbed. It wasn't to the point that we could use it for anything. And so if you take that and you couple it with our need to have space for our nursing program, for occupational therapy, for athletic training, and our public health programs, so there's this big demand for space. And then we've got this large shell space that's totally unusable. And then we have a donor that came in and saw the vision that we have to create, not only to create a space for education, but to create something that's transformative, to include all the disciplines, and to have a place where they can be an true interprofessional education. One of the obstacles that we have in academics is the creation of silos. My nursing program is very siloed. They don't work with engineering, for example. They don't work with occupational therapy or athletic training. So there is a trend, right, where you allow those barriers to kind of dissolve, and then you strengthen and look at the strengths, look at what can you get out of reducing those barriers. In the term for nursing, now they get to, at the same site, they get to see how athletic trainers deal with it. They get to see how occupational therapists deal with it. So we create a space that's a meeting junction for all those disciplines. Not only does it promote, the shared curriculum, and resources, but it also gives our students an opportunity that they would otherwise miss. It's a very rich opportunity for students. It increases our simulation space. It allows for standardized patients. They're kind of like actors. So it looks like a mock-up clinical. So when you're there, it looks like you're in a hospital, very similar to our 4th floor simulation space, which is absolutely beautiful. So it looks like a mock-up hospital. We have actors in the roles of the patients. They really know their stuff. And then it's part of the simulation. And we can use that to address some of the shortages for clinicals. Right now with COVID, it's very, very hard to get clinical placement. This helps us in times when we have COVID, which may be here for the next 6 years. So the space is critical to meet a need, and it's also an opportunity to transform curriculum. It also salvages a space that's currently not used.
Great.
Madam Chair, if I could, I would just like to make a public thank you to the John Boyne family for their $1 million contribution to make this happen.
Great, great. Thank you. And Dean Quayle's the 6-year reminder on COVID was not appreciated, but probably accurate. Thank you. Questions, comments?
Trish.
Tim.
Thank you for this, for Jeremy's point on in his forward thinking and forward leadership as we look at this putting together disciplines and creating a better worker, a better citizen, a more knowledgeable person to go into our workforce. I've been saying this for a number of years, and when you combine the arts, when you show other disciplines like nursing, paramedics with doctors, it just creates a much better workforce, a much better prepared student that will leave USM. So thank you for that forward leadership and that forward thinking. That's just great to hear.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? With that, then, why don't we move to the resolution? That the Finance, Facility and Technologies Committee authorizes the University of Southern Maine, acting through the University of Maine system, to spend up to $900,000 to create an interprofessional education lab space located in the basement of the C Wing of the Science Building on the Portland campus. Funding for this project will be from gifts. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Trustee Doak, second?
Second.
Second by Trustee Gardner. Ellen?
And this is within the committee purview, so it will not be forwarded to the board meeting in January. Trustee King?
Yes.
Trustee Doak?
Yes.
Trustee Donnelly?
Yes.
Trustee Irwin?
Yes.
Trustee Gardner?
Yes.
Trustee Cates?
Yes.
Trustee McMahon?
Yes.
Trustee Martin?
Yes.
Trustee Riley?
Yes.
Trustee Rotundo?
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Great. Thank you. And thank you for that clarification, Ellen. Let's move to tab 15, the renovation of 274 Front Street, the expansion of the University of Maine Farmington Sweet Winter Child Care and Early Education Center that we saw a little preview of in Vice Chancellor Fernie Mundy's presentation. And I believe we have Laurie Gardner, who's the CBO at UMF.
Yes, thank you. With me today is Dr. Kathy Yardley, Associate Provost, Dean of College of Education, Health and Rehabilitation, and Keenan Farwell, Director of Facilities Management. Good morning. The University of Maine at Farmington requests authorization to spend up to $3.1 million to conduct a renovation by replacement of UMF's Sweat Winter Child Care Center, which includes early childhood programming and workforce training opportunities. This phase of the project budget consists of the renovation portion of the project to renovate 274 Front Street to relocate our Sweat Winter Child Care Center from the middle of the campus into a newly renovated Sweat Winter Child Care and Early Education Center located at the entrance to campus. This is a shovel-ready project. We plan to modernize and expand our nationally accredited child care center by renovating a former call center into a 10,000 square foot state-of-the-art multi-use, all-inclusive child care and academic facility, offering direct experience for students enrolled in undergraduate and graduate early childhood education classes. At least 20 new infant toddler slots will be added, and enrollment in UMF's early childhood education degree programs will be expanded by at least 20% to help produce more of the early childhood professionals Maine needs. UMF students will have opportunities for paid work study and internship placements at the center. The overall renovation phase of the project is estimated to be $3.1 million. Funding is earmarked as follows: up to $1.4 million from the 2018 state bond, $600,000 from the congressionally directed spending earmark, $1 million from the Maine Job Recovery Act, and $100,000 from the Lennox Foundation. This cost is in addition to the $850,000 February 2019 purchase of the building that was approved by the FFT and accepted by the Board of Trustees in January of 2019. The new facility will directly address the impacts of the pandemic, including reducing educational and economic disparities. Additionally, the expanded center will ensure more young children in Franklin County have access to quality early learning so their parents can fully participate in the workforce and improve their own economic outlook and that of the rural region. The governor has committed to expand public pre-K, for which a 4-year teaching degree is typically required. There is even more pressing need for qualified and certified early educators, and Maine's 10-year economic plan and the Economic Recovery Committee recommends investments that grow the early childhood educator workforce and increase access to quality, affordable early learning and care. The project does not result in an increase in campus square footage. The NAV of the building is currently 77.5%, and an increase in NAV is expected after renovation is complete. Operation of the facility has already been absorbed into UMF's budget as it's currently being used as the campus's COVID-19 testing center. The technology in the classroom located in the building will allow early childhood and early childhood special education undergraduate and graduate faculty opportunities to provide more training and professional development about best practices, as well as the ability to offer summer institutes at the new facility that will be open to students and staff from other system campuses. It will also be a model for nature-based education that other campuses can learn from. The schematic design is complete. The bid package is being developed and tentative advertisement is scheduled for January 25th, 2022. We anticipate awarding the construction contract mid-March with a mid-April construction start date. Renovation is anticipated to be concluded by the end of December, and we anticipate opening the expanded facility around January 15th, 2023. Thank you for your time and consideration, and we can answer any questions you might have.
Great, thank you very much. Questions? Anybody? Trustee Rotundo?
Yeah, thank you. This sounds like a very exciting project, and we all know the importance of early childhood education to our state. I was just curious at this point, what percentage of your graduates go on in early childhood education? Do you know?
Kathy?
Good morning. What percentage go on directly into the field or into?
Yes.
I would say all of our graduates. In fact, by the time they're doing their portfolio presentations, a large number of them have positions already offered to them within early care and education. Their internships often work into that. And many of our others are hired directly into the public schools because we prepare them not only to work into B-5 settings, but also into K-3 settings. So it's the whole range of birth through age 8. So there's lots of opportunities for them.
Thank you. And about how many graduates would that be in your program?
So we have, right now, we had 41 new students come into our program. We generally have well over 100 because not only we have the on-campus program, but we offer an off-campus program located at SMCC. So it's a program completion for adult learners who are place-bound and already working. And last year we graduated 12 students from our Master's in Early Childhood program. So we generally graduate between 12 and 15 a year with master's degrees.
Thank you. It's very encouraging.
Other questions? Okay, I think we're ready for the resolution. That the FFT committee approves the following resolution to be forwarded to the Board of Trustees for approval at the January 24th board meeting. That the Board of Trustees accepts the recommendation of the FFT committee and authorizes the University of Maine system acting through the University of Maine at Farmington to expend up to $3.1 million comprised of 2018 bond congressionally directed spending earmark, the Foundation's awards, and the Maine Job Recovery Act for renovation at 274 Front Street as the new home of the Sweat Winter Child Care and Early Education Center. The approved initial spending limit is set at $1.5 million, with the additional $1.6 million to be authorized by the Chancellor and Vice Chancellor for Finance, Administration, and Treasurer, contingent upon obtaining confirmation of the Maine Jobs Recovery Funds as well as the congressionally directed spending earmark. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Trustee Kane, seconded by Trustee Doe, was that?
It was Trustee Gardner.
Yep.
Trustee Kane,
Yes.
Trustee Doak,
Yes.
Trustee Donnelly,
Yes.
Trustee Irwin,
Yes.
Trustee Gardner,
Yes.
Trustee Cates,
Yes.
Trustee McMahon,
Yes.
Trustee Martin,
Yes.
Trustee Riley, Trustee Rotundo.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Laurie and Kathy, very much. Okay. Change of gears. We have long talked about the development strategies within the system, and I think today's meeting has been wonderful at sort of highlighting, as we struggle with budgets, the importance of development and external gifts to really advance a lot of important initiatives. And we have with us Jeff Mills, who is the president and CEO of the University of Maine Foundation, and Ainsley Wallace, the president and CEO of the USM Foundation. I don't know, Ryan, do you want to set this up or just?
Yeah, I think, I don't know if Darla has a few words at the beginning.
Yeah.
I just note we typically, this is an annual report that we do. Typically, it ends up as kind of just board materials, and we don't spend a lot of time on it. In setting up our work plan this year, in conversations with the chair, we talked about not only maybe having a little bit more discussion about it, but asking if Jeff and Ainsley could be here to share some of their knowledge with the board as well. So I think we turn it over to Darla for an intro, and then right to the two foundations.
Thanks, Darla.
I guess it's still morning, so I'll say good morning. We've got 5 minutes left. So the annual report that we typically provide to you is actually found in tab 16.1 of the materials. And I'm not going to spend a great deal of time on this, but just point out a couple of things. Hopefully everyone can see it. The first thing that I would note is that this report is actually divided into a couple of sections. The first few pages are, they show the gift revenues and the available gift and endowment balances for the University of Maine system itself. Those figures do not include the activity and assets held by the various fundraising entities such as the UMaine Foundation and the University of Southern Maine Foundation. And but in the second part of the report, which starts about pages 9, 10, and 11, we do show some summarized information for each of those affiliated fundraising organizations, show the gifts raised during the current year and also their available gift and endowment balances. Now, going quickly to, whoops, I've lost my place. Going quickly to page 3, I just would note that there was actually a $4 million or 20% increase in gift revenues for the University of Maine system from FY20 to FY21. And the gifts that are reported in this report, they're cash-based. So they do not include any gifts in kind. For example, if a construction outfit donated services or materials to a construction project, those would not be included in this type of report. And it also does not include any pledge balances that may still be outstanding. So I would point that, and then on page 7, we have what the gift balances were as of June 30th. And you can see that at the end of FY21, we had $166 million endowment market value at that point in time. The one thing I would note is that 69 million of this figure represents the original corpus or the original amount of the gifts and cannot be spent. And the remaining $97 million will be distributed in future years in accordance with our endowment spending policy. And that is basically the end of my highlights. Sort of make sure that Jeff and Ainsley have plenty of time for their presentation, and I would just ask if there are any questions on the gift report itself.
Thank you, Darla. Any questions? And I think we need to go back to, there we go. Any questions for Darla in the overview? Okay, with that, let us turn to the foundation folks. I assume they're with us. Jeff,
Yes.
are you're first on my list. Are you kicking it off?
Well, I'd be glad to. Thank you for having Ainsley and I here today. As far as I know, it's one of the few times in the history of the system that USM and UMaine Foundation have done a presentation together. So, hey, wonderful. Progress. We have a few slides that will help with our presentation, and we will move forward with those. And first off, to introduce ourselves. Ainsley is the president and CEO of the University of Southern Maine Foundation. We're going to introduce each other, in case you hadn't noticed. Her BA is from Bowdoin College. She's president CEO of the USM Foundation. She has launched the largest capital campaign, comprehensive campaign in the university's history. And you'll see the completion rates there with gifts and pledges that they are approximately 50%. They've recently received a couple of CASE Circle of Excellence Awards. CASE is the Council and Advancement and Support of Education. It's kind of the group that we nationally report our numbers into, sets the standards for fundraising across the country. So great news there. Before her current position, she was the vice president for corporate engagement at USM and also the vice president of the USM Foundation. And she also, before that, had worked with the leadership roles with United Way, Greater Portland Jackson Lab, and other former nonprofit executive director. So, Ainsley.
Yeah, good morning or good afternoon, everyone, and Happy New Year. It is my pleasure to introduce my great colleague and friend, Jeff Mills, the president and CEO of the UMaine Foundation. Should I say Dr. Jeffrey Mills, who is a proud Black Bear, a UMaine graduate. He has his master's and his PhD from Arizona State, also has an executive certificate from the Kennedy School at Harvard University. Many people know Jeff's history of public service as a former Maine State Senator and Maine State Representative. Jeff is currently an adjunct faculty member at the Maine Business School. And I'm going to ad-lib here just to say that this is Jeff's second time leading the UMaine Foundation, and that Jeff has gotten accolades everywhere he's gone, that every entity that Jeff has led has gotten better under his leadership. At Arizona State and at Monmouth, where Monmouth University received CASE's National Award for Most Improved Fundraising during Jeff's tenure and advancement there. And hopefully, as you can tell, we really enjoy working together and are really happy to have the opportunity to talk with you today about university foundations. So
Great.
I'm trying to move us forward.
Next one.
Little technical difficulty here.
Well, while you're working on that, I can kind of
Yeah.
talk about it. So we're going to talk about our institutions themselves and how long they've been around and what they are. And so I'll start with the UMaine Foundation while she's working on the slide. We were established in 1934. We're one of the first 7 public universities to have a private foundation in the United States. Basically, we had a reunion class coming back for their 25th that had graduated 25 years before, 1934. They had lived through World War I. They had lived through the Spanish pandemic. They had also gone through the Great Depression, and they talked about the fact that at that time, even though the vast majority of tuition was paid for the students through the state, that most Maine students were still going to need help to get through with their private costs, housing, other things. So the foundation was formed then. It is a separate 501c3. Why is that? We'll talk about that in a moment. We have about 40 employees. We are currently in the process of looking for a person in our marketing area. So if anybody knows of someone that would be good for that, we would appreciate your thoughts. Our endowment. This is one of the things I think is really important for trustees to realize and understand. So we are currently the University of Maine's overall endowments, which is a little tricky because we have a pulp and paper foundation endowment. We also have the 4-H endowment. As with many land grants, you have other endowments that are in different pockets. When you combine all of them with what we have at the system office for Orono together, our endowment, combined endowment, is approximately $445 million. Out of that, the lion's share of those holdings are at the UMaine Foundation, which I'm president CEO of. We have 2 locations in Orono and Falmouth.
And comparatively, the USM Foundation is a young upstart. So the foundation became an independent 501c3 in 1996, but only in 2018 did the USM Foundation become a separate organization with employees. And so we have talked about the size of our endowment. It's about 10% of the UMaine Foundation's endowment right now, just under 45 million. But we are the little engine that could, and we're working on increasing those numbers. But we talked about how, this isn't dissimilar from where the UMaine Foundation was 30 years ago in terms of endowment size. So it's just at a different place in our organization's history. And the shift to becoming a separate entity happened under President Cummings' leadership and my predecessor, George Campbell, who saw that this is a trend in public higher education, that larger universities have separate foundations for reasons that we'll talk about in a moment. So unlike the UMaine Foundation, USM's Alumni Association also falls within the USM Foundation. And so we have currently 16.5 full-time employees, and we're also looking for an executive assistant. So if you know anyone who is looking for really great executive assistant work, we would love to hear about it. And we're located on the USM campus in Portland.
So one more thing, if we could just stay on that for a second, that I think is really important for trustees and others to realize is the overall combined endowment of the system. You should realize is over $500 million. Okay, so it's really important. I think I often feel that people don't realize that, and not just trustees, but I mean in general. And that puts us in the state of Maine third. Bowdoin being first, as you would expect, as a private institution that's been around for so long. Colby second, UMaine System third, and then Bates is behind that by about 100 million. And then you have to drop down about $500 million before you get to the next institution in the state of Maine, which would be the University of New England. I sometimes think because of the way the system has functioned, a lot of people don't really understand the amount, the big number that we have and how much we affect the state because of that. I always caution that. My predecessor always cautioned about mentioning our combined endowment or at the Orono campus or the system, because speaking as a former legislator or others, a lot of people think that's unrestricted rainy day money that you can just grab. And over 99% of that money has already been, by you, the donors, restricted for what it can be used for. As you heard today, almost every item that you had on the agenda was from donors' money that's been restricted for that purpose. So it can't be just picked up and moved for a budget hole or something else. And that is basically the same for any public institution, particularly in the Northeast. When we did the analysis here last year, we are a little bit lower on our restricted number than others. Most of the public institutions are about 99.5% restricted already. And those dollars that get paid over, we do an analysis each year for the university to know what the payover is going to be that we give to them, and it's kind of already baked into the budget. So I always bring that up because whenever there's a budget hole, a lot of people will say, oh my gosh, we should just be grabbing the money that's already restricted that's in the endowments. Great. Why don't you take that, go ahead.
Yeah. So why have an independent foundation? I mean, there are arguably more reasons than this, but at minimum, there are 3 reasons that are advantageous to the system. That first, donors can remain anonymous, unlike gifts to public institutions, which under the Sunshine Laws have to be disclosed. That a gift to a private foundation is allowed to stay anonymous if the donor so wishes, and we know that we both have donors to both of our
Significant
foundations.
amount of dollars that.
Yeah. Who are significant, who want to preserve their anonymity. Secondly, public-private advocacy, notably the bond campaigns. As you know, the UMaine Foundation has taken a lead role in organizing bond campaigns for the University of Maine system in the past. And then the USM Foundation in 2018 was able to take the lead on the most recent bond initiative because the foundation had become fully separate. So that's an opportunity that is philanthropy adjacent, but clearly important in the revenue mix of the system, that you can have particular advocacy on behalf of the system. And then third, nimbleness and the ability to pivot. And I know that we've had opportunities in both of our foundations to be able to move quickly and be responsive along with donors in ways that are because we're small nonprofit organizations. So Jeff, is there anything that you would add to this?
Yeah. So for example, on nimbleness, we've been asked to sign leases for the University of Maine in Portland or other places where they had a vacancy. They needed that office space immediately. If they'd had to go through the normal process of getting significant time process to be able to get that lease signed, that property might be gone by then. So they've asked us to sometimes sign the lease. Many times we'll sign the lease until the university can get it through the board, those types of things. So that's under the nimbleness. Under the private, public-private, as Sam Warren can tell you and others, there are more and more restrictions for political campaigns on what public entities can do. For example, many of you remember the bear baiting question that was on the ballot a few years ago. One of the groups took the game wardens that appeared in those ads to court to say that since they were public figures, they should not be advocating for one side or the other. So you're seeing more and more challenges happening. I believe that was found that they could be in those ads, but you're seeing more and more challenges of what public entities can do. And I think in the political environment we're in, you're going to see that more and more in the future.
So Jeff, do you want to talk about the 3 stages of a campaign?
Yeah. So just to give you a basic quick primer on what I call today comprehensive campaigns. They usually are in 3 major phases. The silent phase, where you start looking at what you want to move forward with for your next campaign. You do an internal assessment usually to see how you are. Many times you hire somebody to come in and do that, but at least you do it yourself, of how many staff members you have. Do you have to add for the next campaign some staff members, usually major gift officers, for that, so that you have an opportunity to take a look at all of those things. That's called the silent phase. You're not announcing anything publicly. You're also trying to start to look at what you call the needs assessment of a campus, to see what you would hope would be the hopes and dreams of the next campaign. Once you complete that, you move into the quiet phase, where you go out and usually hire a national consulting firm to come in to help you to see if those hopes and dreams are feasible, and go around to the donors to find out how likely is it that they would give to these projects you're looking at, and what amount they think would be a number that you could come up with. So for example, when we went to our quiet phase for our prior campaign here, the consultants came back and said that we could raise probably, in their educated guesstimate at this stage, somewhere between 150 million and 200 million. Then you start going and asking those people during that quiet phase. You go to you round up all of those people that were in the study. your best donors that you think you have the best chance with. You go out and you start raising that money at a more non-silent phase, because now you're in a quiet phase with those people, but you haven't announced anything to the press or anywhere else on what you think the number is. The idea is that you want to only do that when you've got 2/3 to 3/4 of your amount raised. So when we went to you to ask to go to the public phase, we said, we think we can do 200 million. You approved that number. And we went out and we announced that. And that helps you. Many times people make the analogy with fundraising. It's a lot like running a marathon with your prep time and your silent phase. You're out there running, you get those first miles off, boom, boom, boom. But then you kind of hit the wall when you get to the 2/3, 3/4 campaign, because kind of the easier money is gone. So that's why you go public at that point, to push you over that amount. So those are the three phases. I would say one of the biggest misunderstandings of people, and you've even seen it in the history of the system over the last 55 years, is many times people do the silent phase and they jump over the quiet phase and they go right to the public phase and they announce a number publicly without going through the quiet phase. And it causes a lot of issues if you do that, because many times you have to go back and adjust your number and it's confusing to people. So those are the three overall phases.
Yeah, and one of the things that we've been saying with our board recently is that while USM's campaign is in the quiet phase, it's not meant to be a secret phase. Like that this is, that people are aware that there's something happening, which also helps create the buzz so that when the campaign is formally announced in the public phase, people are already excited about it because they're hearing murmurs that something's going on. So I'll talk to where the USM Foundation is right now, and then kick it back to you, Jeff. Yep. So as all of you know, I believe that the University of Southern Maine Foundation launched USM's Great University campaign in its quiet phase, July 1st, 2020. This is the largest campaign in USM history. We currently have a working goal of $46 million, but like Jeff said, this isn't a formal goal because we're still actively fundraising in the quiet phase. The projects that the campaign will fund include scholarships and student support, a Center for the Arts on the Portland campus, the Career and Student Success Center, and then programs of excellence across the university. And you've heard about some of those earlier this morning as well.
Great. So as I mentioned, we did our public phase for the 200 million. We ended up finishing ahead of goal and on time, record-breaking 208 million, largest campaign in the university system's history. So the great thing about fundraising is if you're ever worried about need for employment, it never ends. The day that you stop one campaign, you start the process for the next one. So we are in the beginning stages, silent phase. And of course, normally, one of the things that in all the campaigns that I've been in, you always worry about is how are you going to possibly top what you just did? And cannot say enough about Chancellor Joan Freeney-Monday, Ken Ralph, all their work to work with the Alphon Foundation for one of the largest ever public grants that will initiate us to be able to really kick off where we move forward as we begin to do the planning for and work and continue to raise money for the Transforms gift from the Alphons. Go ahead, Ainsley.
Yeah, so the last 3 years of fundraising at the USM Foundation has been, moving forward from what USM's history is. In 2019, we hit our high water mark at that point of 7.3 million. We had a little bit of a dip due to the pandemic in 2020. And then in 2021, we hit 15.6 million, and we hope to do about that again this year as well.
And so you can see our last 3 years, again, from endowment perspective, return on endowment also, we raised over 103 million just in our endowment in 1 year alone this last year. Who would have thought? I thought it was going to be one of the worst years ever for us with COVID and everything else that was going on. So we finished last year at 33 million. So we're continuing to see very strong fundraising, even with everything that's going on. I bring up these numbers also for you to take a look at, because one of the things that often happens is people say, by God, we're going to set a goal for this year. And if you don't make that goal, you know, you're not going to, you know, you're going to have cuts, or you're going to have to. So even Case with all of their national awards, when we won the national award when I was in New Jersey or anything else, they do it on a 3-year rolling average because you can see the differences. And why? Because you will have a lot of gifts that are planned gifts that will come in. You don't know for sure with a lot of planned gifts when somebody's going to pass away or other things that you've done for the campaign. So what you want to do is you want to set overall strategies for 3. When you do your scope of work, you want to do your overall plan for your campaigns, and you want to figure out what on average you want for growth for that campaign on average per year. And then you set your standards based upon those.
Yeah, that's great. And and another benefit of campaigns is that also it increases the overall run rate for the advancement operation in general. So so after each campaign, if you're raising $10 million before, hopefully you'll have, you know, significant spikes during the campaign. But then at the end of that, like, you should be raising, you know, $12 million after that. And so that's another reason why the cycle that Jeff was talking about, you know, going from one campaign into the next is so important for philanthropy to be a real piece of the university's revenue mix into the future.
So the Portland Maine Center, Graduate and Professional Center, is another first. So back about a year and a half ago, the Chancellor asked the UMaine Foundation to take the lead as we were finishing up our campaign to help with the systems campaign for the $7.5 million for the first phase match from the Alphons for the Graduate Professional Center. So when he did that, he also asked that the other 2 foundation heads of the law school and Ainsley to work with us for all of the planning, etc. We meet every week and every 2 weeks with the fundraisers along with us, with our prospect management and also our research group. I'm pleased to say that we are at 7.1 million. I'd like to thank Trustee Trish Riley for getting us over the $7 million figure this past couple of weeks. And we are working with another donor who has given a significant gift from before to see if there might be possibilities. Jim Thalen is helping us with trying to see if we might be able to even finish that off. Most everybody thought that because of COVID and other reasons with us coming in late to that campaign, that would not be this close to finished. So I'm really pleased again to see all the success that we've had. And it's been great to also have the new dean of the law school come in and be able to help us with all of our fundraising with that project. And also, I would want to mention Terry Sutton, also who heads up Maine Center Ventures. She's been great with some of the grant proposals and other things that we've been able to use that have been counted in that 7.1. So very quickly, I just wanted to mention a couple of other things that I think are important as trustees for people to know, and some of you know it, but others might not. One of the things that I find that's kind of fascinating when I do presentations for boards usually is I have 10 questions that I ask, and I have everybody fill out the answers, and then we put them in a hat and pull them out and put what the answers are so that we can compare. One of the first ones I always ask is, what do you think the average percentage for a public land grant institution is of donors? What percentage of their alumni give back? And then I always ask, what do you think the average number is for private institutions across the country for giving back? And then we sort through that. Many times we'll have answers in there that are something like 70%, 80%, etc. The answer to that is for public land grant institutions, it's somewhere around 8%. I always usually ask, because it's usually the highest, what do you think Penn State's number is on average per year? And it's somewhere between 18 to 20% usually. So that means the vast majority of even their donors and our donors, some 90% of our donors do not give, and that's across the country. And so when you look at the other institutions within the system, the vast majority of our campuses within the system, it will be something like 98% to 99% of their alums will not be giving a gift. This is often shocking to those of you that are trustees or involved, because you give or are very involved with your campuses. So you can't imagine that everybody is not giving. So that number continues to go down across the country. The biggest reason that is given by CASE and VSE for that is because we are graduating larger and larger classes now. So our denominator is causing that. And within those classes that are graduating now, we're having more and more of those people be non-traditional, people that are learning online. And all of your statistics show that people that learn that way are less likely to give back than those who have more of a holistic time period on campus. So that's another thing that I think a lot of people might not realize. And the one other one I'd like to bring up is, for generations, the rule of fundraising was that 80% of your money came from 20% of your donor base. This last decade, that shifted dramatically for the first time in history, the largest percentage in history. That switched to 90% of your gifts came from 10% of your donors. And most of the campaigns that are reporting in that are finishing up now are closer to 95% of their money is coming from 5% of their alumni donor base. So you're seeing a big shift in that. And it's going to become even more important for us to have good research departments, because separating the wheat from the chaff is going to be critical as we continue to move forward, to be able to use science to help us to be able, part of fundraising, to be able to help us with the art part, so that we get in front of the right people to put the art piece together. Ainsley.
Thanks for ending on a Debbie Downer note, Jeff.
Well, I do not want to end on that, because our numbers are going up. So the people that are giving more. Also, although our percentage is going down, the number of donors is going up because we have a larger group. So that is also true. And the amount of wealth that is going to transfer in the next decade from the baby boomer generation that is transferring wealth is huge. So the potential for all of those things is great for the fundraising pieces. And that's why we're very optimistic about what will be happening in the future.
Great. Well, thank you, Jeff and Ainsley. Questions, comments?
Chair Riley, may I make a comment?
Absolutely.
Just wanted to say, make the connection here that engaged students give more by percentage. So when we want to increase these numbers, we increase the engagement opportunities. And both, you have a couple of people on the screen here, Joan and John, really trying to increase the research learning experiences, and then across almost every face on this call, trying to increase internship type opportunities. And those are great ways to get that engagement up, and those students tend to give more.
And I think to Jeff's point about restricted funds and sort of how legislatures might look at that, can you speak, isn't it in the report, I think it shows that the amount of scholarship money that's generated is obviously an extraordinarily important piece for budgeting.
Yes, the vast majority of our permanent endowments, and I'm sure it's the same at USM, are for scholarships.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Any questions? Any other comments?
Thank you all for all your help. We appreciate it.
Thank you, and
Thank you.
It's particularly nice to see this collaboration. So thank you both. Okay, we have two more agenda items. Here we go. We're going to make it. On tab 17, capital project status report and bond projects update with Carolyn.
Thank you, Chair Riley, and thank you everyone for your attention. The capital project status report, I just have a couple of items I would bring to your attention as echoing, I think, a lot of what's been discussed so far this morning. As you see, the number of projects on the report is increasing, and as a result of today, will continue to increase. But on top of that, and as Chip mentioned, and can be seen in the graphs on page 4 of the report, the value of the investments and the capital resources under management has seen a significant increase over the last few years, from 50 million in 2019 to over 20 million in this past year. And if my numbers are right, I think we authorized over another 35 million today. So that number continues to increase. So we've got plenty to do. And if I can, I was impressed that both of the foundations are hiring, and I wanted to say, so am I. So shameless advertising. Just kidding. The other things I wanted to point out in the report are the bond projects continue to reflect those projects moving forward. As you may be aware, it's being a 2018 bond. We are in 2022 now, so we are working on getting those spent and closed up, but many of those are still ongoing. And then of note, sort of out of the ordinary on the report, is a couple of items related to UMaine's ASCC, Advanced Structures and Composite Center. One minor increase, a temporary increase in space to accommodate their offices, their faculty and staff. There's a temporary office building that's been put in place that is in a expectation of getting the gem building going. So that will be there for a few years, but that's their temporary work there. And then the other one is the $9.5 million project for the wind and wave expansion that has been on the report now for well over 5 years since it was completed, is finally going to be removed from the report, as the remaining funding is being moved into an equipment purchase and is not really a capital project report item any longer. So we'll be removing that. And that's all I've got for highlights that I'd like to make, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Carolyn. Any questions? Did I see any questions? No? Okay, thank you, Carolyn. The last item on our agenda is tab 18 in the materials. There was not a formal presentation here. It's in the materials. This was the report that's required when the system does not use open competitive procurement, but uses sole procurement, and the reasons why. It was in your material. Chip is here, and I think Kevin Carr, to answer questions if you have any. Are there questions on the report about sole procurement when it's used? Okay. Well, it certainly has been a long meeting, and I know there was an enormous amount of reading to get us here. So thank you all. Is there any other item of business to come before us?
Just thank you, Madam Chair, for navigating 5 or 6 hours worth of materials in about a 3.5, 4-hour time slot. So thank you for that.
I hope that means everybody still felt that they had opportunity to speak, and that we didn't rush any of the conversation. They're important discussions, and I really appreciate everybody's time. So with that, people can go have lunch. I think we don't need a motion to adjourn, so I'll simply close the meeting and thank everybody very much for all your time and effort.